Everything you are about to see actually happened. 8 hours a day for 36 days, a special Senate subcommittee held televised hearings known as the Army McCarthy hearings in the spring of 1954. In these hearings, the Army charged that Senator McCarthy and his chief counsel, Roy Cohn, had first tried to keep G. David Schein, a consultant to the McCarthy Committee, out of the Army. Second, that they tried to get a direct commission for Schein. And finally, once he was inducted, that they sought special favor for him. McCarthy and Cohn countercharged that the Army attempted blackmail by holding Private Schein as a hostage in order to stop McCarthy's investigation of alleged communism at various Army bases.
But the line between investigating and persecuting is a very fine one, and the junior senator from Wisconsin has stepped over it repeatedly.
The average American can do very little insofar as digging communist espionage agents out of our government is concerned. This is a war which a brutalitarian force has won to a greater extent than any brutalitarian force has won a war in the history of the world before. For example, Christianity, which has been in existence for 2,000 years, has not converted, convinced nearly as many people as this communist brutalitarianism has enslaved in 106 years. And they're not going to stop. I know that many of my good friends seem to feel that this is sort of a game you can play. That you can talk about communism as though it's something 10,000 miles away. Mr. Jenkins, to answer your question, let me say it's right here with us now. Unless we make sure that there is no infiltration of our government, then just as certain as you sit there, in the period of our lives, you will see a red world.
Giờ sắp khơi phải chung kia, sắp khơi phải nấu prey ấy chân giờ sắp.
Ông sắp khơi nhà nạc làm với sắp ông đi gọn.
Chẳng bột.
Pol Pot, they call him brother number 1, and Nunchi, brother number 2.
Cả nó ai chụp hiệp kia, Pol Pot có cật vô xóm đó, rồi viên nhom hỏi nên có viên bánh hạ ấy nè, tiệm tuồng cái chít snap, sầm rách, từ mùi kia.
ការធ្វើបដិវត្តទួនាទីក្នុងការធ្វើសង្គ្រាមរបស់ជាតិគឺប្រជាជនកម្មករកសិករដែលមានចំនួនភាគច្រើនដាច់ខាតអ្នកទាំងនេះបានទ្រនៅទម្ងន់ច្រើនជាងគេអ្នកនេះត្រូវទទួលផល
Sir, all I can give you is my own opinion. And in my opinion, the reason that it was done was just for comparative purposes, just like in a prize fight on television. One of the fighters wears dark trunks, and one of the fighters wear light trunks. That's the only reason that I could see.
Hey, why am I on this thing? Why am I on? Why am I at the end of that? Did he do that to promo me? Oh, well, thank you, Socrates. Good God. Thanks. Awesome, cool. Alright, so, what's up, guys? What's up? Oh, let me pop my chat box out. Make sure to put your chat box on live chat so you can see everything. Yeah, dude, Socrates videos, they're so fucking good. He showed me this program that's like Microsoft iMovies. Like, it's like a Windows version of iMovies. Because he makes his stuff in iMovies. He just does all that in iMovies. So I'm going to try to make more, like, I want to try to make my intro video, but Video Vegas is it's hard. Hey, what's up? What's up, Tim? What's up, Fritz? Omega Max, Liam, Pencil, Chris, Frida Game, Space Bitch, Jake, Triple Crown, JM, Pete Ard, what's up, Pete? Yeah, Adobe Premiere is good, but holy shit, it's that's a beastly program. Okay, guys, so here's what tonight is. So, I've been watching, and I'll explain the way I did this whole process, so you know where everything's coming from. You're free to disagree with, like, the main opinion, but if you do disagree with it and you are like a left-wing kind of guy or even center, or like you just don't like Trump or something, pay attention to this, because this is what I thought about when I was watching all this, and like compare it to Mueller doing what Mueller does today, because it couldn't be more similar. It's almost exactly like there's no smoking gun anywhere. There's just little tidbits here and there, but they have this narrative that they're trying to, like, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're trying to go for. So, it's very similar to that, I noticed. But anyway, so what I'll do is, like, first, so what I did was I watched this guy's lecture kind of thing where he talks all about this, and he does it from, like, the same side. He does it from the same, like, McCarthy may not have been so wrong when you look at it in context. And he uses a bunch of authors and stuff, so I went to his sources, and then I started searching for those authors in YouTube, and I found a couple, like, I found this interview with one of them, a C-SPAN, like, one of those book talk things with another one. So those aren't bad. I got this Bill Whittle thing where it's a little bit different. I don't know if I'll get to it, but it kind of goes into that stuff too. I got this this video is kind of cool. It's like super old. Look at this thing.
State at the start that I am not now and never the world had ever seen. Her economy bolstered scores of nations. She was respected even by her conquered enemies. But long before the children born in that war could vote, the tide had already turned. And by the time their children had grown, the United States had retreated from victory and was struggling for survival in a hostile world.
So yeah, that's like this old school thing. And then here's another old school video. So these should be kind of interesting. This one, unfortunately, is more about the 1960s, which is after McCarthyism.
In the late 1950s, when Fidel Castro was taking his revolution out of the mountains toward the
there's no significance to it. It's just about McCarthy from his side of the story, and saying like, because McCarthyism is like a derogatory term, and people just sort of think like, oh well, McCarthyism, that's derogatory. Well, everything McCarthy did was bad. But this will go into why he did what he did, and this whole intro stream tonight will be setting it up to say, okay, so like this is what he was dealing with. This is where the country was at. This is where the high level of government was at the time, and this is why he went the way he did. You'll see that you'll see several interesting things. Let me go back to the folder, my folder. Let me see here. This I found interesting, so I'll skip ahead a little bit just to do like a preview kind of thing of later tonight. So come on, fucking Photos app, stupid Photos app on Windows. First of all, it's like shutting my computer down just trying to load a photo, and it takes forever. Okay. Oh, that's not the right one. Go to the next image. Whoops. Anyway, I can't get it open right now, but basically Harry Truman, the president, had a spy in the FBI gathered information. They passed it along to the agency or department where the problem exists. So the FBI sent a memo to Truman, and they said, your Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Harry Dexter White, is a Soviet spy. Truman ignored the warning, and in early 1946, he promoted White to executive director of the U.S. mission to the International Monetary Fund. So then he was sent a second report by the FBI, and again, he did nothing. And then this Harry White guy, he resigned from the government, and in 1947, he was in a committee, and he was questioned, and he was exposed to have communist ties by Elizabeth Bentley when she appeared before the House Committee on Un-American Activities in 1948, which is the McCarthyism one. So basically the reason they went so hard is because they were doing this the right way. They were going through the right channels. The FBI was researching everything, and the actual people in government were doing nothing. They were ignoring it. So that's why like he was pissed. That's why he just like lit this whole thing on fire, because like he was sick of them going the right way and being ignored. So anyway, that's like a little bit preview thing. So anyway, guys, let's start out. Why did communism get so popular? And this is a good timeline right here by these guys, and I'll play some of the video too.
Origins of communism.
But it's just talking.
So, depending on how broadly one
pictures and
defines
stuff
it.
too.
Stretch back as
This was a very good video. This will just sort of open up and talk about why communism got so popular in the first world.
far as some of the religious and anti-monarchical political movements of the Middle Ages and post-Enlightenment Europe. But the modern ideologies of socialism and communism took form in the upper middle intellectual classes of industrialized 19th century Europe, most notably with Karl Marx, and in the aftermath of World War I, their implementation in the ashes of the Tsar's empire following the Russian Revolution of 1917. As Europe struggled to make sense of itself after the Great War, America was enjoying a relative boom during the Roaring '20s and remained relatively resistant to calls for an atheistic workers' revolution in a still deeply religious and geographically dispersed society. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, however, the appeal of the communist promises of work, bread, and solidarity began to spread worldwide, and the seeds for communism.
Whoops, I was muted. So you gotta remember the Great Depression came only 20, less than 20 years after they instituted the Federal Reserve Bank. In 1913, I think Woodrow Wilson did that, and it was less than 20 years before a depression hit. So the reason like communism originally got so big is the Industrial Revolution, as you saw there. And if you think about it, like if you like read the Karl Marx stuff, a lot of what he says in that is based on like the diagrams he uses and the examples he uses is all based on factory work. Like it'll be the workers here, the managers here, the owners here, and he talked about that. So what he was actually doing is trying to provide a solution to the disastrous life of being a factory worker during Industrial Revolution when there was no protections whatsoever. There was none. Like, people who are communists today, they think they have it hard. You're a fucking joke. Like, you have it so fucking easy. You couldn't have it easier because of all the protections you have. Back then, you're working 18-hour days. You're like 14 years old. You get your hand chopped off. You don't get shit. You basically go homeless. Like, you don't. There's nothing gonna happen to you. So, Industrial Revolution, what that did was it made it so that the governments were starting to get bought off. Let me see. I have another slide that I want to read while I do this. Maybe this is it. So, the governments would start to get bought off by the factory owners. So what you have is you have these massive factories who are above the law. The owners are above the law. The people who like manage them and everything are seen as higher class citizens now. It's not the days anymore of like equal opportunity starving and farms, like working on farms and scratching around for food for the winter. It's not like that anymore. Now there are certain people who are just always going to be above you. Their kids are above them, or above your kids, and it starts to form this like caste system where people are there's no American dream. Like you're gonna be poor, your kids are gonna be poor. You might invent some shit and like be the lucky one, but the chances of that happening, you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the free time to do that. So there's a lot of buildup of like really people are annoyed, like people are sick of that life. They're sick of being slaves, basically. And so the governments are being bought off by the factories, so you got pollution, insane amounts of pollution, because this is early, like, steam-powered, coal-powered shit. It's, like, very, very, it's black smoke coming out of chimneys, your house is right there, and you go to the government to complain, and they aren't going to they aren't going to do shit for you. They'll probably see you as a problem and be annoyed at you. So you gotta realize, like, people wanted a solution to this, and that's where Karl Marx comes in. That's why he made the book he made, because it's much different than today. It was pretty fucked up life back then, so it makes communism more understandable in that regard. So yeah, you got a couple different people here. A lot of them are like religious too, which is funny because I think the whole religious communism thing sort of ended pretty quick after Karl Marx came out, because one of his things was to kill off God, because God is, I don't really know why he wanted that, but so anyway, yeah, you got first communist club is founded by immigrants from Germany. I don't know about that. More powerful advances in infrastructure and mechanical engineering, as well as basic advances in electrons, develops the second industrial revolution. So yeah, that's probably another thing too, is that there's all this technology that's being built up around you, but it's not for you. And it will never be for you. You're still living in shit. You're still living in, like, I forgot what they called them in New York City, where you had like 13 people in a family and they're all living in the same apartment. I forgot what they called those, but yeah, you're just living in trash. You're sleeping with your brother and sister till you're like 18 and all stuffed in the same bed. Hey, what's up, guys? What's up? Okay, so let's just listen to a little more of this, and then we'll have the basic idea of why did this theory become so popular to people.
Communist infiltration into American society took hold, most notably in the Roosevelt administration, and right up through the Second World War as the United States allied
Tenements, thank you guys, yeah.
itself with the Soviet Union.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Military-industrial complex.
A new world order.
Exactly, like the grandparents and Charlie and the Charlie. Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing. You're watching your grandparents die, and nobody's gonna help them. There's no good medical care. Only the rich people are getting that. So you're just annoyed as fuck. You're just like, okay, I don't. If we can come up with something to just overthrow all these people and just say fuck them, I want to do that. That's probably sort of the mentality.
But we are here to destroy the control over the industry of other people.
I did not trade arms for hostages.
It's been time, dearly.
На полный разгон гнусных захватчиков.
Miltă faptă tu minți sinci podcast.
Welcome to the Myth of the 20th Century podcast.
You also realize why the nationalism got so big? Like why people were cheering for those armies? Because they saw those armies as the people's army. I think that's what they actually call it. But they saw those armies as their guns are pointed towards the factory owners and the big cats and all that stuff. If you guys want to watch this one little thing, I wasn't going to put it on, but I think it is very interesting. It's a USSR propaganda cartoon. It's about a little dog. Some of you might have seen this before, but it's fucking great. It shows it's making fun of America. It's ripping on America, and it's showing how the big cats are there. You can see how the way that they treated like big industrial moguls and all that, it was the fuel. It was like the coal being thrown into the engine for all these people to keep supporting communism. We'll just watch a little bit of it. It's 10 minutes long. This is from 1963, by the way. I don't actually remember how I found this. I remember I found this during when we were all in SciTube, like that back in the way back then. I put it on there and everyone was like, "The fuck are you watching? Like, what is this shit?" But it's just good. It's interesting.
В одной стране жила. Богатая старуха внезапно умерла. Остался без хозяйки угрюм и одинок. Такой же, как хозяйка, породистый бульдог.
So the dog's about nobody else can inherit the money but the dog.
Имела та старуха племянников родных, а также по закону наследников иных.
just to make it a little quicker, there'll be certain parts I'll just kind of fast forward through. Like, there's a scene when they all dance. There's no talking or anything. They're just dancing for like 2-3 minutes. Like, so I'll skip through a little bit of that. Because you gotta see at the end. There's a still shot at the end where it's just crazy. Like, it's just such a cool. They all morph into like these evil, like, hell dogs for a second as they're looking down on the workers. You'll see.
Имела та старуха солидный капитал. Когда жгли наследство, советный час настал. Наследники узнали к позору своему, что все, увы, досталось бульдогу одному. Не могут адвокаты за это отвечать. Закон на завещании, есть подпись и печать. Покойница в конторе составила его. Она озолотила любимца своего. Вермак, но стал миляй его курносый нос.
Oh, my mic was muted, damn it.
Квартира в самом центре, на 5-й авеню. Шеф-повар составляет на каждый день меню. На завтрак отбивные.
Crab dinner and shit.
Бифштексы на обед. На ужин фрикадельки, сардины и паштет. Он ездит на курорт, здоровье бережет. По средам парикмахер под бок стрижет.
This is like a SoundCloud rapper who got a record deal. Right, pressure.
Есть у бульдога вилла и новый кадиллак.
Oh, brand new Cadillac.
У портного собачий черный фрак. Согласно завещанию, живет при нем слуга. Он ездит с ним на скачки, на гонки, на бега.
Okay, so it goes on for a little bit. He's just partying on the town. But it'll start to show how he morphs into one of them. How he becomes one of the upper class who looks down on the lower class. And that's the idea that they're trying to get into people's heads.
Саксофонов и флёр.
So this is the dancing part. This is dancing. Look at how they're morphing now into him. So now he knows the life now. He's drunk. See, you can see where the propaganda comes in, but, you know, how far is it from the truth? It's up to you to decide. So he's acclimated. He's one of them now. Oh wait, hang on. Here we go, yeah.
Знакомых собачонок
ignoring dogs he used to know.
Уже не
Bark and
узнает.
wag their tails.
потом в клуб миллионеров записан как банкир. У них он научился рычать при слове «мир».
Here we go, look at this, look at how they morph. Scary.
Печатают газеты с бульдогом интервью, точку зрения.
So this is really the kind of stuff that fueled this, because they could look at America and they could show the way that, obviously, when you have more freedom, when you have opportunities to become rich or stay poor and all that, when you have all that, then there's going to be a lot more inequality, because some people are going to want to do it and some people aren't, and the people who aren't might just also get all resentful of the ones who did. And that's an eternal thing that we're always going to deal with. So, see how it ends. 15 more seconds. They said now you know what crooked money does. Okay, so yeah, so that's the basic stuff about why was communism getting so popular? Why did all these people start following it? And now we'll get into the World War II aspect and the way that the USA and the Soviets. Let me see. Let me pull up my my slide. Okay, so it was weird because the USA and Soviets shouldn't have been allies in World War II, but they were because they had a common enemy. So that was a weird thing where the Adolf Hitler's surprise invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 turned the U.S. and Russians into wartime allies. So this resulted in a lot of pro-Soviet propaganda in the U.S. because they're in the middle of a war and there's so much propaganda. You know how much propaganda there is in the U.S. So there was all kinds of like, hey, the Soviets are great. Like, hey, Ivan and Richard are taking on Hans, and they're like, it was that kind of thing. So it built this like interest in people in the Soviet Union, or this association of the Soviet Union and a friend. So that didn't help anything. Hold on, sorry guys. In the spring of 1945, which is right after the war, orders from Moscow come in, and the U.S. communists, they're told to reverse their policy of peace and reconciliation with the West and switch to a militant anti-capitalist stance. So that was one of the things that was found in this, which is, we'll get to that in a second. It's called the Klaus Report. Supposedly it was wiped. It was scrubbed from every, like, these authors, a lot of them, because it was like they made their stuff earlier than the internet, they couldn't really even find this thing. Like, this thing was supposedly completely erased, but somebody uploaded, allegedly, the real one. I don't know if it is or not. You can't really tell. So spring 1945, yeah, so Canadian American authorities uncover evidence of Soviet espionage, suggesting the Americans had been illegally involved in passing classified secrets to the Russians. So now you got Russian spies entering the picture. And when you have such a close friendship during a war, it's going to be the lines start getting drawn of like, what is the basic communication we need to share with each other for, to be allied armies, and what is too much. So that became a weird thing. Relationships were created, hey, like, come out to Moscow, have dinner with us, that kind of shit. 1946, Robert Taft, a senator, accused Harry Truman of seeking a Congress dominated by a policy of appeasing the Russians abroad and fostering communism at home. Now, I don't really know exactly why. I should have wrote more down on that, but so I guess Truman was probably doing a lot of government programs or something like that, and they thought, oh, you're too friendly to the Russians now. And this is post-war, because now we're starting to get to like, hey, these guys really were never our ally. We just had to ally with them. Federal employees could be fired for treasonous activities as well as sympathetic association with organizations deemed by the Attorney General to be communist, fascist, or totalitarian. So let's get into Let's start here, because this is one of the authors that I'm getting a lot of this info from. I forgot his exact name. They're about to say it though. But yeah, this guy researched this stuff a lot. He is one of the good. He's one who dedicated a lot of time to his book here.
Herbert Romerstein's new book, The Venona Secrets, examines Soviet espionage against the U.S. during World War II.
It's kind of low volume.
Next, as part of our weekly look at history books, Mr. Romerstein talks about his book and the motivations behind the Americans who served as Soviet spies during that period. His remarks were hosted by the Institute for World Politics in Washington, D.C., and last about 50 minutes.
My name is John Lenchowski, and I'm director of the Institute of World Politics. And for those of you who are new to the Institute, we are a graduate school of statecraft, of national security affairs, and of moral leadership.
Platt, thanks. Yeah, sorry guys that I'm not reading the chat as much. I'm just trying to get, you know, like all my information. I got like I got a folder with slides in it, my notepad, and like 9 tabs ready to go. So it's just trying to get all this stuff down. Okay, here we go. This guy is a straight bitch. Yeah, guys, I can't get the volume higher. I turned everything up that I possibly could. I'll wait like to. It's gonna be a pain in the ass. I don't know. So I'll try not to talk as much. I'll turn my mic down. How about that? I turn my mic down to this right here, and then you guys could turn your volume up for this segment.
We are only 10 years old. This year is our 10th anniversary, and we're in the business of teaching people a professional curriculum of study on the matters, on the different instruments of statecraft in a context of the study of many of those liberal arts which are oftentimes not well enough taught in the major academic institutions to prepare people for professional study in this field. We are specializing in the study of...
I thought, because Blacklist is cool, he comes in all the time, so I think he was talking about the guy on here, but I don't know, maybe he was.
Number of different fields that have been neglected in the international affairs curriculum, including such subjects as intelligence, propaganda, political warfare, public diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, and other such subjects which are oftentimes, in spite of the fact that large budgets may be spent on them, are not well studied before people go into professional work in these fields. One reason why we exist and have managed to penetrate and then it's a great pleasure for me to,
okay, well, I'll turn my mic up a little bit. I wish I can get this louder, this video, but I have no other options to turn my volume up. So yeah, if you just want to turn up yours for a bit, and after we end this video, I'll just remind you guys to turn it down again. But so I'm skipping through this intro speech. I'm getting right to the guy. This is the guy who wrote the book.
Was to give the next generation the information that we of Michelle, Kowski, and I can use. Thank you, John, but it must be a miracle of technology that John Lenchowski and I can use the same microphone without moving it. First of all, I would like to thank the people that set up this gathering, John Lenchowski, of course, Jim, Michelle, Mario, who did so much work to get this group together. The whole idea of the book was to give the next generation the information that we now have about how the Soviet Union operated its intelligence service against us when we were ostensibly allies during World War II. And it was an incredible thing. The Soviets had something that no other government at any time in history ever had, And that is a cadre of people in the other country who were loyal to the Soviet Union, and because they were loyal, they were prepared to spy against their own country. That's an amazing concept. Usually, you can get a spy here or you get a spy there. Sometimes you get a spy for ideology, sometimes you get them for money. But the Soviets got a large number of people on the basis of ideology. Some of these people paid dues to the Communist Party for the privilege of being spies for the Soviet Union. And they were in the most incredible places. I mean, we all know the names of Alger Hiss in the State Department or Harry Dexter White in the Treasury Department. But there were many more. There was Lachlan Curry in the White House, and amazingly, President Roosevelt's closest friend and associate, Harry Hopkins, in the White House. A man who knew everything about everything in the United States government, anything he wanted to know. And his control officer, and we talk about him in the book and the control officer as well, Isaac Akhmerov, who was one of the most amazing men in the history of Soviet intelligence. He was here as an illegal. To the Americans, the American government, he was just a man with an accent who happened to be a businessman in New York and in Baltimore with an American wife. Very nice gentleman. Everybody liked him. He was the illegal directorate for the Soviet intelligence service, at that time called NKVD. We later knew it as KGB. He was the illegal director in the United States. And he handled Harry Hopkins. He met with Alger Hiss. He met with a number of other of the key spies. And we knew about him. We only knew a name. We only knew him as Bill. When Elizabeth Bentley in 1945 told the FBI about her role in Soviet spying, and she said, my contact was a Russian who I only know as Bill. It took years for the FBI to identify that Bill as Isaac Akhmerov. And in the 1970s, Akhmerov, teaching at the KGB school...
Identify Bill as a chimera. It can't get the Russian names right.
In Moscow, boasted to his class that he ran Harry Hopkins, the most important American agent that the Soviet Union had. And sitting in that class was Oleg Gordievsky, who defected to the British and spent 10 years in KGB on behalf of the British intelligence service, reporting what the KGB was into. And Gordievsky is an incredibly courageous man who was able to report to the West about what was happening. But the interesting thing in this context is he heard Akhmerov talk about Akhmerov's agent, Harry Hopkins. You look at the role of some of these people in very high positions. Why did they spy? They spied because their loyalty was to the Soviet Union. And it's rather amazing to read the New York Times the other day. Gus Hall, the longtime head of the American Communist Party, died at the age of 90. And a piece appears in the New York Times of October 21st, sort of a eulogy to Gus Hall by Victor Novatsky of The Nation. Novatsky spent his whole writing career defending Alger Hiss, defending the Rosenbergs, arguing that these people were not Soviet spies. And now he says, in the New York Times just a few days ago, a new cadre of Cold War historians seems intent on seizing fragments from Cold War archives, ambiguous intercepts from cables between Moscow and its American-based agency and other ephemera to prove that the American Communist Party was indeed the center of a nest of spies. Gee, I wonder why anybody would think that, looking at the documentation. And what's interesting is that the documents from Moscow, the communications from Moscow that were broken by the NSA, and so that it's possible for us to read what Moscow...
Oh, my genocide. But what this is to give context to what McCarthy had in his head. To what the next episode is going to be actual, like, okay, enter McCarthy into the picture. That this one will be all about Soviet infiltration, that weird relationship between the U.S. and the Soviets, how the Cold War started, and all that stuff, like what he was dealing with in his head, what he was hearing, what the reports said that he was getting to make him do what he wanted, or what he did.
Moscow was telling its intelligence officers in the United States, and what they were reporting back to Moscow, are hardly ambiguous. In the case of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, whom Novatsky spent so many years defending, there's one cable that says that Liberal, which was the code name for Julius Rosenberg, and his wife have recommended their sister-in-law, Ruth Greenglass, name spelled out, Ruth Greenglass, to be an agent. And that's not ambiguous at all. And Moscow would not have trusted a recommendation from the corner grocery store guy. They trusted a recommendation from their two trusted spies in the United States who recommended their sister-in-law to be another spy. In regard to Alger Hiss, who Novatsky defended for so many years, the document is quite clear. Akhmerov meets with Hiss, who was not an agent of the NKVD. He was an agent of the GRU, the Soviet Military Intelligence Service. And he contacted Akhmerov to say that his handlers, his military handlers, were not treating his information with the respect he expected, and they were paying no attention to important material he had, and could the NKVD take over the transmission of some of this material back to Moscow. And he boasts to Akhmerov that when he was in Moscow after the Yalta conference, he was in the American delegation at Yalta and an advisor to President Roosevelt, he then flew with the Secretary of State to Moscow, and that obviously not in the presence of any other American, the Soviet government gave him a medal for his work against the United States. And so Novatsky would like to defend these people still, but it's embarrassing to him that there are people going into the archives and looking at the materials and actually understanding what these materials mean. My wife and I had to work in the Moscow archives of the Communist International, and material that was available to us just a few years ago has now been closed.
Gravy.
But we brought back some thousands of microfilms, which they allowed us, which they made for us, in fact. But they've now closed it so others cannot have it. But we try to make these materials available to anybody who would like them. And of course, the remarkable work that was done by the U.S. intelligence people in breaking the Venona traffic, the communications between Moscow and their agent networks in the United States through their intelligence officers. Excuse me. That material is wonderful. But in addition to giving us new material, identification of agents that we had not known about before, it also confirms that Whittaker Chambers and Elizabeth Bentley, when they testified in 1948 before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, told the truth.
We're going to get into Elizabeth Bentley in Chapter 2. She's a big factor in all this.
Things that Bentley said that we could never check out over the years show up in Venona, and it's quite clear that when she talked about these things, she was truthful about them. The other thing in the New York Times of a couple of days ago was an editorial eulogy.
We'll do a little bit more of this guy, and then we'll try to watch one of those documentaries about like one of those old school documentaries about the Russian infiltration, or a little bit of it, and then we'll we'll talk about what the U.S. was doing when the FBI was handling all this and telling them who the spies were, and like collecting all this information, sending it. Truman ignored it, promoted one of the guys who was later exposed to be a spy. There's a couple other cases too that we could talk about. So that's a big factor in McCarthy, where he was sick of this stuff being ignored and just it was just let go, like it was just happening and nobody was doing shit about it.
Gus Hall, the head of the Communist Party for so many years, and they said that he never wavered in his belief in communism. He didn't waver because he was getting between $1 million and $2 million a year through KGB channels to run the American Communist Party. And the Times says he didn't waver because that would have offended his native Midwestern stubbornness. He wasn't a stooge of the Soviet dictatorship because he was a Midwestern American. He was a stooge because he was anti-American, because he was a total believer in the horrible system of the Soviet Union, the Gulag, the aggression against their neighbors, their alliance with Adolf Hitler. All of the things that the Soviet Union did, Gus Hall liked those things because he hated America. And the Times has not gotten the message yet. Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a pause from him, and let me get into my slides here, and talk about some more of the things that were happening right before McCarthy got on the scene. So, okay, so they're talking a lot about like the 40s, the late 40s and all that, and in the summer of 1946, and we'll put the report up here. The Klaus report came out, and that was that thing I was just telling you about that was like scrubbed from everything. It was vanished from all archives. So we can't be sure that this is it. It looks like a government document does. Like, it would take a whole lot of work to make this thing and forge it. It's 106 pages or something. It's a crazy amount of pages. The number of Russian agents reported to be on the state payroll was in it. Alleged Communist Party members totaling 33. They were named. Other suspects or sympathizers, an additional 90 people. The suspected agents' name. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, guys. So the suspected agents' names were not included in the report. Only the numbers, the total amount of them. 4 years later, McCarthy found out about this report and its contents, and then that led to his investigations. This document was the key foundational record of communist infiltration in the U.S. State Department. As a result, whoops, fucking god damn it. Just press your scroll wheel one time and your picture changes. Alright. Excuse me, sorry. Alright. Over 20 documents detailing this infiltration have all vanished. But we think we have it. We don't know for sure, but ex-communist J.B. Matthews was appointed as the research director of the Diaz panel, returning to public life as an aide to McCarthy. To McCarthy, period. Matthews compiled a 2,000-page document listing 500 organizations and 22,000 people that were tied to the communist network. And again, like I said, that guy was a U.S. Treasury Secretary or something. Can I zoom in on this? Let's see. It doesn't make the document bigger, damn it. I wanted to just show like the table of contents, but damn it, man. Let me see here. See what I can do. That's a little bit better. Still not making the... Okay, well, we can just kind of click around here. Okay, this thing's gonna be tough to read. Like, I'll just read out a couple little parts. Maybe if there's a table of contents, that'll make it easier. Oh my god, I can barely read it. Okay, so the table of contents is the findings, division of the investigations, okay. Office of Security Officer, Security Committee, conclusions. More conclusions. See if we can just go to the conclusions. That's what I'd do if I was in the government. Just be like, just skip me to the conclusions. What's the bottom line? So they're naming people's names in this. So I don't really know. Here's an example. Mr. Kimball is an applicant. Paul Penn Townsend Kimball. Mr. Kimball is an applicant for the Foreign Service. He had been investigated by the CSA and a favorable recommendation was sent to Mr. Chapin of OPS. It appears that he was about to take his oral examinations. It was noted in the OPS that no FBI report had been received on him. When requested for its report, FBI reported by telephone that in 1941 the New York newspaper, can't read that, but it's not New York Times, had distributed a circular defending a strike of the North American Aviation Company in California, and that the name of Penn Kimball of the grievance committee of the newspaper had been included in this circular. FBI noted that it was a strike which had prompted the president to furnish troops to the protest the workers. I'm sorry, I think it actually says protect. Kimball passed the oral examinations, and they noted in the report that the owner of the United States News in Washington was being interviewed. It said Kimball had left his employ to take employment of the something. The Kimball had displayed a turning to the left. The CSA report on which the state, as Mr. Lawrence knew the applicant's father, recently offered the applicant a position as a foreign correspondent. The applicant had been keen about accepting it. Mr. Lawrence described the liberal side of the applicant's views, probably due to his father being a stale old Connecticut manufacturer. When interviewed, So, alright guys, I'm gonna stop reading this one because... Okay, anyways, okay, here we go, this is the juicy part. FBI seemed to have also investigated Kimball's reputation in New Britain, Connecticut. As reported, his reputation was described of him being extremely liberal and inclined towards socialism. One informant said he was one of those young fellows who has received too much education and gone communist or socialist. That informants used the language communist or socialist in the same adhering to Marxist doctrines seems unlikely. So he was like a brocialist. The applicant was rejected as a security risk. It may be noted that Kimball's file... So this is just an example of one of the guys in here. They do their research, they start asking around, they look to see, like, what else has he been involved in? What is he doing? And they say, like, there's something wrong with this guy. You gotta remember, too, like I said, we're not talking today's communists. We're not talking... like, we just want to share with everyone and we hate big capitalism. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, like, USSR allied communism, which is like an imperialistic, take the world over, workers of the world unite, overthrow all governments. We're talking about, like, a legit communist sort of hub, like a headquarters of communism in the world that people could work for. So it was like a little bit different than what we're dealing with today with communists. Most of them are just like optimists. So this is an interesting thing too. Let me get my slide on this out. This is just some of the stuff he was dealing with. This is the kind of information he had. The first one was called the Klaus Report. This one is called the Hatch Report. The Hatch Act was adopted in 1939 and toughened in 1940. It made it illegal the act made illegal the hiring of retention of federal workers who advocated for the overthrow of our constitutional form of government, a rate phrase officially referring to members of the Communist Party. Hatch Act, United States. So this is what he was using as his legal justification. This is what McCarthy was citing, because back then, technically, he had the law. Like, he had the law on his side, pretty much. So, it has decided officially as a matter of policy that it will not favorably certify to any department or agency the name of any person when it has been established that he is a member of the Communist Party, German Bund, or any other communist or Nazi organization. When we find anybody who has any association with the communists, the German Bund, or any other foreign organization of that kind, that person is disqualified immediately. All doubts are being resolved in favor of the government. So they don't get the benefit of the doubt. Like that guy that we just read, that Kimball guy, you could have said, okay, well, yeah, maybe he's got some left-wing tendencies. Maybe he's vented to his friends. Okay, maybe he was involved in a strike and all that. But, no, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, let's just assume that he's, maybe he's changed a little bit or something. Like, they would never do that. The all benefit of the doubt goes to the government's favor. Prohibits employees from engaging in some forms of political activity. It went into law in August 1939. I want to see... Oh, it was most recently amended in 2012. Interesting. So it technically is still in the law books. But I wonder what the amendment is. Oh, of course. Of fucking course. Barack Obama signed the Hatch Act Modernization Act in 2012, December. It modified penalties under the Hatch Act to allow for disciplinary actions in addition to removal of federal employees, clarified the capability to the District of Columbia of provisions that cover the state and local governments, limited the prohibition on state and local employees running for elective office to employees whose salary is paid completely by federal loans or grants. Wait a minute. So wait a minute. So people who are paid by the government can still run for office? That's very weird. Anyway, so that's the Hatch Act. That's the kind of thing that McCarthy could cite as he was doing this. So, again, a lot of people say, like, it's not constitutional, you know, they shouldn't have done that stuff because people are allowed to be communists in the U.S. Like, it's not it is free speech. This is the legal justification that they use to counter that claim because they see it as something that Moscow has clearly ordered for the removal of the U.S. government and anti-capitalist stance. They see that as something way different than like just free speech. So that's why McCarthy was going after these people so hard, and it's also why he didn't need to have some kind of smoking gun necessarily, because all the benefit of the doubt went to the government. Okay, so let's check a little bit of this one out. It's not as long. We won't check all of it out. We'll do maybe like 10 minutes. She's another one who wrote one of the books that a lot of the info I've been getting is sourced from her. I didn't read her book. I just watched this lecture thing that cited her book.
It's on the telephone right now.
Oh shit, it's so loud, guys. You might want to let me turn my mic back up here. And you might want to turn your volume down, give you a volume warning. Here we go.
Diana West is a columnist and an author. Her newest book is American Betrayal, The Secret Assault on Our Nation's Character. Her website is dianawest.com. Diana, welcome to True News.
Thank you very much, Rick. I can tell I'm in the right place.
Well, I'm looking forward to this interview. Anytime that we can expose the lies of the communists that have infiltrated this country throughout the 20th century and now in full control of the White House. I want to bring that guest on this program.
By the way, so, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of melodramatics in here. I personally, maybe you guys do out there, I don't really believe that there is communists in full control of the White House during the Obama administration. I don't believe it. I think Obama played the game like everyone else does. He wasn't even that much different than George Bush, except for a couple, like, abortion and gay marriage and stuff.
And give that person all the freedom and liberty possible to tell the truth. So, and we'll get to Mr. Obama later as time permits, because I think he is the culmination of what you're going to tell us about was happening in the 1930s. So let's where do we start? Where do we start in this story about this overthrow of the United States? That's what it is. It is
Second American Revolution.
Yes,
perhaps.
It is.
Well,
yo, Foucault is my World of Warcraft friend. Me and him played World of Warcraft together in Discord, on our guild's Discord, just so you guys know. What's up, Foucault? Yeah, we're just looking at McCarthy tonight. We're looking at the other side of the story. Just is for a little mental exploration. It's just to see a story that usually gets painted directly towards the McCarthy is evil, everything he did was bad. We're looking at like why he did what he did. We're putting ourselves in his shoes.
The beginning is certainly with the overthrow of Russia and the Russian Revolution in 1917, which brought this revolutionary government into being called the Soviet Union. That was actually its purpose, its open stated goal, its strategy was to overthrow the rest of the world and impose the teachings of Marx.
There you go.
And then Marxism-Leninism, and then we get to Stalin. Now, 4 American presidents, beginning in 1917, refused to recognize this revolutionary government, knowing full well that you could not have, quote, normal, or even normal without quotes, relations with a government designed toward your, or calculating towards your own destruction. This was obviously, you could not have agreements, they would be broken, you could not have any kind of deals or alliances. And so this government was shunned by the United States until 1933. And that was the year in November when Franklin Roosevelt, then in his very first term, recognized the Soviet Union, normalized relations. And I argue that this is a very logical place to take up this story of the overthrow of the United States, as you put it, of the Second American Revolution, as other writers in our past have noted. And what it introduced, you know, what your show is all about, really, it introduced this in an institutional way, I believe, into American history, into American governance, into our institutions. And this was lying, the big lie. Indeed, in that act of recognition, which was based on a set of promises, really, it's a short agreement that was actually signed to normalize relations. It's essentially a set of promises that the Soviet Union made to to us that it would not try to overthrow us. It essentially restated this in many different ways. The Soviet Union promised not to support cadres of secret agents in our country, for example, as a term of this normalization. Well, this was already underway. We already had the infiltration beginning, Soviet-directed, a Communist Party-directed. However, it certainly increased exponentially with this agreement. And what I discovered at a certain point in my research was that in order to perpetuate this alliance, to continue relations with the Soviet Union, which became really an obsession of American governments from that day forward.
Oh, yeah. Alan, where did you send the link to me for your Down the Rabbit Hole theme? I've been meaning to play it again, but I can't remember what, was it Discord, Twitter, Reddit? I can't remember what service it was that you sent it on, so I can't find the link. Was it Twitter?
Forward. The American government had to learn to lie to the people and tell us lies about communism, tell us lies about Stalin, tell us lies about the Soviet Union. And I think in some way, this is where we see the rise of double standards. I think we also see the rise eventually of moral relativism, cultural relativism. These ills that we see in our culture today, I think, have their roots in this relationship. And so I would just begin with this very beginning, because I think it was that important. November 16, 1933, the day we recognized the Soviet Union.
And Diana, I think we need to state that the Bolshevik Revolution, which overthrew the Russian people and carried out a massive number of murders of Russian Christian priests, the Orthodox churches, tens of millions of Russians put to death. The Bolshevik Revolution was only possible because the leaders of it had funding and secret support from some of the biggest and richest men and institutions in the United States. And I'm specifically talking about the Rockefellers, and I'm talking about the New York Federal Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
There is a paper trail showing the money flowing to the Bolshevik Revolution from the New York Federal Reserve. And so there were people and institutions in America who were secretly funding the Bolshevik Revolution. And so we have to step back and ask, why? What was the strategy? What were they doing? And how are we falling for the deception today?
Well, are you talking about people who believed in global government, who were interested in converging the capitalist system with the communist system? Yes. Well, this was something that Roosevelt himself believed in, convergence. And I suppose the money people you're talking about came out of that same mindset and were promoting that same mindset and were indeed the influences on Roosevelt in making this decision. It was an extraordinary decision because, for example, and this is something that Alexander Solzhenitsyn would talk about in later years, the Allies were always, or the Western governments, the Western democracies, were always hostile to Tsarist Russia. And Solzhenitsyn made the point that this was very strange given the record of the Bolshevik government coming in terms of body count. And he talked about this, that in pre-revolutionary times, the Tsarist government executed about 17 political prisoners a year. Now, he compared this to the Spanish Inquisition, which at its height, he said, destroyed 10 people a month. So we've got an uptick there. But in those early revolutionary years, the Soviet, the new Bolshevik secret police, executed without trial more than 1,000 people per month. Later in the 1930s, Stalin was killing tens of thousands of people per month. And yet the United States rushed into alliance, rushed to recognize the Soviet government under Roosevelt during World War II, rushed into this alliance. And yet we consider, even in our lore, our minds, that Tsarist Russia was so much worse. And this is part of the same mythology. And this was something that Solzhenitsyn could never understand. And what you're talking about is helps fill in some of these gaps in terms of the global economic forces that were definitely pushing in this direction.
Okay, so we'll go. I want to get a documentary on here. I want to get a visual one going. This one, unfortunately, is a little bit about. I think this one is the one that's kind of 60s-ish. No, it's not actually. This is the early one. Okay, this will be a good one. So, okay, what I wanted to get from this woman is her book had a lot of info in it, from the source material or whatever, but the main thing I wanted to get out of her is just to stress that fact that we're not talking about let's have everyone share and let's win the people over for a new government. They wanted to overthrow the Constitution. So why would you let the Constitution protect them? You know, like, that's sort of the question that they were dealing with, and that's what the Hatch Act answered for them. Hatch Act 1939. Okay, so let's get into this documentary. Actually, really quick. Nah, fuck it. Let's go right to the documentary. Oh, shit. Get back there. This is old school, where they actually you purchase the videotape.
I should like to state at the start that I am not now
fuck.
and never have been a
God damn, my mic's on, sorry.
communist. Ask them if they ever found in me anything except the highest adherence to duty and honor.
If I am lying, I should go to jail. If Mr. Chambers is lying, he should go to jail.
I am not and never have been a communist.
In this cell, there was also Owen J. Lattimore.
All that Senator McCarthy has been trying to do is expose
It's our boy.
the communists who have infiltrated the Department of the Army.
And let me say that I am honored when people come up to me on the streets, perhaps I don't deserve this honor, and say, you're the man who killed Joe McCarthy.
That's another thing, by the way, too, is a lot of the urgency and a lot of the, like, really harsh approach that they took against them is because they thought the army was infiltrated. So obviously, if your military is infiltrated, now you got, like, a really serious problem on your hand.
The rapid decline of the power and prestige of the United States undoubtedly will be recorded by future scholars as one of the most amazing events in history. With the defeat of the Axis powers in 1945, the United States stood at the apex of world leadership. She commanded the most powerful military force the world had ever seen. Her economy bolstered scores of nations. She was respected even by her conquered enemies. But long before the children born in that war could vote, the tide had already turned. And by the time their children had grown, the United States had retreated from victory and was struggling for survival in a hostile world. Her military forces had become inferior to those of her enemies. Her economy was reeling under attack by...
How would I contact Eric Stryker? That'd be an interesting thing. Isn't he on Fash the Nation? He's like kind of big though, right? I don't know if he would do this. Maybe he would. Yeah, he does Joaquin's show. And that's probably got a lot more viewers now, but it used to get like around the same as me. So maybe he would do it. I'll have to I'll have to talk to him.
Foreign competitors. She was at the mercy of outside energy.
You know, Eric Stryker's he is like a socialist or something, right? I'm pretty sure he was for a long time. I don't think he is a full-on capitalist guy either. So I don't know what he is. I don't know.
Her alliances were crumbling. She was hated and jeered at the United Nations. She had been forced to retreat on every continent, while during that same time, over 70 million people each year were being absorbed by international communism. All of this in less than 2 generations. Now the question is why? The accepted view in many circles is that it just happened that way. There were no particular reasons except the normal changing currents of history in an era of rising expectations. There is, of course, another view, a view that is more skeptical of the supposed blind forces of history, and which sees events as caused by people with motives and goals and long-range plans. This is the conspiratorial view of history, as opposed to the accidental view. And it is the conspiratorial view that we shall present in this program.
And that's what we all come here
it's
for,
our
right?
specific purpose to explore the possibility that America but by the subversion factor.
What the fuck is that reptilian mutation right there? Did you all see that? We were watching some real...
It's our specific purpose to explore the possibility that America...
Oh, God.
But by the subversion factor.
Oh, no. Glitch in the Matrix.
The most significant aspect of communist expansion since 1945 is the fact that it has not been accomplished by traditional military force. These countries were not conquered by external invasion of Soviet troops, but by internal terrorism, revolution, and subversion by people who were citizens of each target nation. In 1967, Soviet Premier Brezhnev said, "Marxist-Leninists have always understood that socialism cannot be implanted by one country into another by military force, that it is the product of the internal development of a given society." Brezhnev's predecessor, Nikita Khrushchev, was even more explicit when he said, "I am convinced that tomorrow the red flag will fly over the United States, but we will not fly the flag. It will be the American people themselves." The historical record is clear. The prime directive of communist strategy is conquest. The most important lesson to be learned is that at the time of takeover, the actual number of communists in any country is usually less than 3%, and in many cases, such as the Soviet Union itself, it has been less than 1% of the total population. The place to begin this inquiry, therefore, is to examine the strategy by which a tiny minority can capture control of an existing government. The success of this strategy has been largely the result of two factors working together. One is the mobilization of mass action among the non-communist population, demonstrations, general strikes, or insurrection. The other is the paralysis of the target government, the inability to fight back effectively, indecision, delays, blunders. It's not surprising, therefore, to learn that a major part of communist strategy is devoted to techniques for creating exactly these two conditions: mobilization of the masses and paralysis of the government. In August of 1922, at a secluded resort near Bridgman, Michigan, law enforcement officers raided a meeting of the top leaders of the Communist Party of America. Hundreds of secret documents were seized. One of the most revealing of these was a directive from Moscow, signed by members of the Executive Committee of the Communist International. In this document, it was firmly established that the Communist Party of America was not independent, but merely a branch of the international organization under firm control of the Soviets. The directive said, "The ruling of the Communist International must be accepted as obligating every member of the Communist Party of America, minority or majority." Another important document was written...
So there you go with the why would he assume that all these people are allied to the USSR, because that was the orders. They joined the party, and that was what the party's rules were.
By the American communists themselves. It said, "The great mass of the working class cannot be formed into organizations consciously under the control of the communists. The communists, therefore, are compelled to function as an underground party. The Communist Party is obliged to penetrate all existing working class and semi-working class organizations to reach the masses, using these organizations as tools and auxiliaries of the Communist Party." The directive made clear that under favorable circumstances, it would be desirable to allow the Communist Party to come out in the open and to appear as a political party. But then it said, "Even though the Communist Party shall have come above ground, the underground organization remains as the directing organ of the open Communist Party." It's important to realize that the open Communist Party, which offers candidates for public office, is not the real organizational force of the movement. It is merely one of the multitude of surface organizations designed to lead the masses. In some countries, such as France and Italy, where communism is viewed merely as a popular political movement, this may be a major channel of mass influence. But in countries such as West Germany, England, or the United States, where the communist label is not popular, it is through the other surface organizations that the underground seeks control of the masses. while the visible communist apparatus serves as a decoy to lull the electorate into believing that the movement is small and harmless. Manipulation of the public is an important part of communist strategy, but the second and equally important objective is paralysis of the target government. For this to be accomplished, it is necessary for the underground to infiltrate into the government itself.
I was one of the editors of the Student Review, which was a more or less communist, it was a communist-controlled student paper. And Edmund Stevens.
Nathaniel Weil joined the Communist Party at Harvard in 1932 after becoming convinced that capitalism was doomed and that the only other alternatives were communism or fascism. Shortly afterward, he obtained employment under the Roosevelt administration in the Department of Agriculture.
By the way, Sargon just had a horseshoe theory orgasm. Just, oh, horseshoe theory is real. Okay, by the way, I'm going to go get a little more coffee and take some kratom, and then I'll keep going and be back in like 30 minutes.
I had been at the job for about a year when I was 23. I received a telephone call from a voice which simply identified itself as Hal from New York. And Hal asked me to meet him at a restaurant in a part of town which government officials did not frequent. I inferred, of course, that Hal represented the Communist Party. And he told me that his name was Hal Ware. He said the decision has been taken to organize a special secret cell of communists who will be totally separated from the party and will include only those people who are believed to have a big future in the government of the United States. This unit will be under the direct control of the Communist International, and you will have nothing to do with the Communist Party or any member of it. We were under no circumstances to engage in communistic talk. We were not to indoctrinate anybody, and we were not to try to recruit anybody.
A lie on that is not considered a lie. Tell us some of your activities when you were a card-carrying member.
Well, I think they're the usual activities for a communist member, participating in picket lines.
In November of 1945, Elizabeth Bentley revealed to the FBI that for 11 years she had served as an espionage courier between an agent from the Soviet Union and members of the American Underground Organization, most of whom held key positions within the United States government. When she was assigned this position, she was told to destroy her party card and any other documentation that might prove she was a member of the party. In her book entitled Out of Bondage, she describes the instructions of the Soviet agent. He said, "You are now no longer an ordinary communist, but a member of the underground. You must cut yourself off completely from all your old communist friends. You cannot even be known as a liberal and move in progressive circles. Instead, you must pose as an ultra-conservative with a slight leaning toward fascism." Larry Grathwohl became a member of the Weather Underground Organization in 1969 as an undercover operative for law enforcement agencies in Ohio. Before breaking away and testifying in 1970, he had risen to the rank of courier and carried directives from the Central Committee to the operating units within various cities. After explaining how the Weather Underground serves the purposes of the Soviet Union with control exerted through Cuba, he then explained the importance of what are called sleepers in the Soviet underground.
However, I can tell you that while I was with the Weathermen, we had certain people that were recruited out of universities that were not allowed to attend meetings, that were dealt with on an individual basis by the person that recruited them. And the idea was for this person's record to be absolutely clean so that he or she could work themselves into key positions of authority and responsibility and therefore be able to do a lot of damage at the right time. Obviously, it would be best if they were in the government somewhere, but or in public utilities. But really, it was sort of like you go on and make your career as best you can, and when the time comes, we'll let you know. So this person could be a vice president or a president of a corporation, multinational or otherwise. Primarily, it was to keep them out of the limelight and keep their records clean. law enforcement was an area they'd like some of them to get into.
As a result of the testimony of scores of individuals from within the communist movement, we're able to get a clear picture of one of the most important components of the underground structure. This is the elite corps, the moles in high places. They have special assignments that require deep cover, and they're considered too valuable to risk being exposed, even to the rank and file of dedicated communists who themselves may belong to other parts of the underground. The important question, of course, is to what extent has this communist underground been successful? Lies the history of subversion by bribery, blackmail, or terrorism. But the subversion of government from within government is a gigantic subject by itself, and it is to that history that we shall turn our attention next.
The Communist Party in the United States was officially established in 1919, only 2 years after the Bolshevik seizure of power in Russia. During the following 2 decades, over 100,000 American citizens flocked into the party. Unemployment and economic depression had convinced them that capitalism was crumbling, and a fear of the rising specter of fascism led them to embrace what they believed was the only alternative. By 1941, when the United States and Russia became allies in World War II, many people viewed...
I missed everything that just happened in the past, like, 4 or 5 minutes or whatever, so I'll just watch now and pick it up there.
American communists as merely patriots and socialist dreamers. And it was in this atmosphere of benign acceptance that the party consolidated its penetration into government. In fact, attempts even to investigate communism were firmly opposed at the highest level.
The National Maritime Union was then under control of the communists, it's not now, and they were putting their operatives on ships, and they had a network of intelligence.
Robert Morris, for many years, has been a key figure in the anti-subversion program of the federal government. He was chief counsel to the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, and during World War II was the officer in charge of the...
Well, you say... Oh, you saw me drink my whole cup. You can see, like... can you see? Yeah, like, I did fill it up. I don't know how... I did go away. Oh, thank you, Czar. I appreciate it. I didn't read it yet. Maybe you're insulting me. I have to say this. You can print the names and faces of white mass shooters on a t-shirt, but to represent black mass shooters and murderers would require 5 times... Jesus, man. Good God, Czar. Give me one of your little faces. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
The counterintelligence unit of the 3rd Naval District in Washington. After describing how President Roosevelt had ordered the Navy to allow Communist Party members to serve as radio operators with access to secret military communiques, Mr. Morris then turned to the subject of Soviet defector Viktor Kravchenko.
So we had to meet him clandestinely, and he was with the Soviet Purchasing Commission. And he had with him evidence substantial for that purpose, but instead they were using it to build up a large navy in the post-war period to take on the British and the Americans. And I had extensive evidence of that.
When Morris brought this information to the attention of his superiors, he was met with cold indifference, was transferred out of intelligence work, and sent to a battle station in the Pacific.
So here you go. This is why McCarthy went as hard as he did on this stuff, why he went so public with it. Because this is the kind of thing that was happening behind the scenes when they're trying to report to people. You know, these people are in the government. They are infiltrating. Their orders were to infiltrate, and they're doing it. And then they get ignored.
Went down there and gave them all the evidence because Kravchenko was standing by, ready to give more information. So I thought it was quite a coup. And 2 days later, I received orders to get out of the country with only 2 days' notice. Apparently, it came to the attention of the White House. The White House didn't want anyone checking up on what the Russians were doing here.
The Office of Strategic Services, known during the war as the OSS, was created to carry out clandestine operations against the Axis powers. It was headed by General William Donovan. It is now known that Donovan, instead of screening out members of the Communist Party, actually made contact with party functionary Eugene Dennis and recruited OSS personnel directly from communist ranks. In Yugoslavia, the OSS vigorously supported the communist resistance forces under Joseph Broz Tito and cut off all supplies to the anti-communist forces under Draza Mihailovic. At the end of the war, the Nazis attempted to surrender to General Mihailovic and to the Americans, but the Allied command refused the offer and insisted that the surrender must be made.
Shut the fuck up. I knew Tim was coming into troll tonight. I knew it. I already said, this is chapter 1. This is all what's going to lead into the entrance of McCarthy into the picture. I am going to do McCarthy, don't worry. I'm going to get there. But I'm not sure when I'm going to do that stream. I might actually just do it tomorrow night. Maybe Tuesday, but no matter what, I'm going to get all of them done this week. Maybe there will be 3 streams on this. I don't know, but they'll all be this week.
Only to Soviet troops, thus ensuring that...
a lot of information. The lecture thing that I was watching is 3.5 hours long. And it's constantly just... Tim, I like Tim. He's great. He's funny. He just chooses whatever. If you're stating an opinion, he'll just become the other opinion and then call you like a complete asshole for believing it. And he doesn't even he'll say oh, Jews are the worst people ever, and then but if you say something like that, he'll be like, what are you talking about? I love Israel. I'm pro-Israel all the way. He's been caught so many times doing that shit.
Yugoslavia would be in communist hands. Back in the United States, when the FBI...
But Tim is going to co-host with me. He's going to co-host with me on DW Washington Rabbit Hole. We are going to do that together. Because he's a good guy, deep down.
I provided General Donovan with evidence that some of his OSS personnel were members of the Communist Party. He replied, I know they're communists. That's why I hired them.
There you go.
After the end of World War II,
there you go. This is the kind of shit we're dealing with.
OSS became the CIA.
Roosevelt issued an order to the Civil Service Commission that investigators were forbidden to ask any questions concerning the communist backgrounds or communist affiliations of any applicant for the federal service.
Otto Otepka, for 36 years, was an internal security specialist for the federal government. In 1953, he became chief security evaluator for the State Department.
This included, of course, people in such key components of the government as the Office of Strategic Services. One of the most ridiculous things I ever heard of as a part of the relaxation of the security procedures then in effect by the Roosevelt administration was an attempt by the president to allow the Soviet Union to have an NKVD office in Washington, D.C., while in reciprocity, the United States would be allowed to have a branch of the OSS in Moscow. Now, when one knowledgeable studies the composition of the OSS from its inception, who would be ahead in that situation? Obviously, the Soviet Union.
Why is that?
Well, because of the OSS, as history has now established, was comprised at the very top in key positions with individuals who were sympathetic to the Soviet Union.
Many of the early recruits by such events as the Hitler-Stalin Pact of 1939, the Soviet invasion of Finland, and the bloody purges by Stalin. The innocent idealists dropped out of the party, but by this time many of their comrades had become hardened revolutionaries and continued to follow. Some of those who left the underground.
And that's that distinction that we're talking about, where we're not talking about your typical hipster brocialist guy who just wants everyone to share. Those people dropped out because they realized well, this is some fucked up stuff we're doing here. Other people did not drop out, and now when McCarthy's going to deal with them, you see why he dealt with them harder.
Ground came forward to tell their story, and it is through their testimony that we have learned about those who remain behind. Whittaker Chambers was one of those who broke away. Chambers revealed that for 14 years he had been a dedicated communist and had acted as liaison in Washington for a group of communists who held high-ranking positions in the federal government. Elizabeth Bentley was another one who broke from the party in disillusionment. She had held a position similar to that of Whittaker Chambers and had dealt with many of the same people.
We were getting information from the Army, particularly the Air Corps, from the Treasury, from the State Department, from the OSS, from the CIAA.
Whittaker Chambers and Elizabeth Bentley described the existence of 3 underground groups or cells. The oldest of these was the Ware Cell, formed by Harold Ware, an official of the Department of Agriculture. The Silvermaster Cell was under the direction of Nathan Gregory Silvermaster, an official of the Farm Security Administration. And the Perlow Cell was headed by Victor Perlow, an official in the Treasury Department. Over 80 persons were identified by name as part of this espionage network. The following is but a brief sampling from that list. Harry Dexter White, Assistant...
Remember, this is the guy we talked about. FBI sent 2 reports. I think it was to Truman. Maybe it was FDR. I can't remember. It was Truman. Truman not only ignored the report from the FBI, he promoted this guy to be part of the International Monetary Fund. He fucking promoted him, knowing that he was spying.
Secretary of the Treasury, first U.S. Director of the International Monetary Fund, author of the Morgenthau Plan for the dismantling of post-war Germany, member of the Advisory Committee of the OSS. Laughlin Curry, Administrative Assistant to President Roosevelt, Specialist on the Far East, Personal Presidential Envoy to China. Harold Glasser, Assistant to Harry Dexter White in the Treasury Department, U.S. Economic Advisor to Foreign Governments, Advisor to Secretary of State George Marshall, helped determine which countries would receive U.S. economic aid. Major William Ullman, United States Air Force, Materiel and Service Division in the Pentagon, access to restricted military information, document photography specialist for the Silvermaster Cell. Also named were Frank Coe in the Treasury Department, John Apt in the Department of Justice, Nathan Witt, Henry Collins in the Department of Labor, Sonia Gold in a Congressional Investigative Committee, and in the OSS, Maurice Halperin, Donald Niven, Duncan Lee, Helen Tenney, J. Julius Joseph, and Donald Wheeler. But perhaps the best-known name of all was Alger Hiss.
Ask them if they ever found in me anything except the highest adherence to duty and honor. Then the committee can judge and the public can judge whether to believe a self-discredited accuser whose names and aliases are as numerous and as casual as his accusations. The other side of this question is the reliability of the allegations before this committee, the undocumented statements of the man who now calls himself Whittaker Chambers.
I don't hate Mr. Hiss. We were close friends, but we are caught.
Oh no, is this like an Opie? This is an Opie rant right here. We used to be close. We talked on the phone for hours. I would just call him and say, "How you doing?"
And the tragedy
He's gonna start crying.
Mr. Hiss represents the concealed enemy against which we are all fighting, and I am fighting. I've testified against him with remorse and pity.
Alger Hiss began his government career as a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Later was employed in the Department of Agriculture, moved to the State Department and rose rapidly to the rank of Assistant Secretary of State. Was official advisor to President Roosevelt at Yalta, where major decisions were made affecting the fate of post-war Europe and China. Supervised the writing of the United Nations Charter. Was chairman and acting Secretary General at the founding meeting of the UN. In 1939, was identified as a communist agent by 2 independent sources, the French Intelligence Service and Whittaker Chambers. The reports were ignored and he was promoted. again in 1945, was implicated by the testimony of Elizabeth Bentley. Again, the reports were ignored, and he was promoted. Was identified a third time in 1946 by a Soviet defector in Canada, and again he was retained and promoted. Finally, after being identified a fourth time by former communist Hedda Massing, was convicted in 1950 for perjury in connection with his denials of espionage activities. Was released from prison in 1954 and began a public campaign to vindicate himself as the victim of a frame-up. In the years following the conviction of Alger Hiss, Nathaniel Weil became yet one more former member of the Soviet underground who testified that to his personal knowledge, Hiss was guilty as charged.
The answer to that is that I attended with Hiss probably, at a guess, 30 meetings of the cell. The cell never contained more than 8 or 10 members while I was in it. And I would also meet them at parties. So that I knew Hiss, even though I did not like him too well. I don't mean I disliked him. I mean he impressed me as a cold, calculating person who had a certain fanaticism about him, a lack of the human qualities that one likes. But I knew him well, so there was no problem in my mind as to identification.
I was not guilty of any of the things Mr. Chambers charged, except that I knew him briefly.
Were you ever a communist?
No, didn't happen to be.
It is estimated that for every person exposed by the testimony of former communists, there are many more that have remained undetected. Elizabeth Bentley stated in 1952 that while she was in the espionage groups working in Washington under Soviet direction, groups that were so important that not even she was allowed to learn of their identities.
So just remember, Elizabeth Bentley is one of the people who was in these she was involved heavily with them, and then she defected when it started to become more of like a subversion and cause riots and stuff. She left it, and that's why she's involved in so many testimonies, because she knew so much. And like that guy said, like what we watched earlier of the Venona Report's speech, like he said, you go back and you look through all these archives, you look through the wires between Moscow and the U.S., and you can see, like, there's a lot of what she's saying in her testimonies did happen. Or at least you can see, like, there are so many circumstantial little pieces of things where it's like where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was so much smoke for what Bentley was saying in the testimonies.
Neither of these cells have ever been exposed. In September of 1949, the Soviet Union successfully detonated its first atomic bomb. Western scientists were stunned because of earlier predictions that Soviet nuclear technology was at least a decade behind the United States.
Oh, Rolly, did you quit the Discord completely? That's what people were saying earlier. Or did you just leave for, like, the afternoon or something?
The story of how the Soviets so quickly acquired this technology begins with the American Lend-Lease program during World War II.
So we are now going to get into, again, McCarthy was dealing with all this in context. We're going to get into Soviets being funneled the American nuclear technology from the, bring the Nazis over and have them start making nuclear and missile and, V-2 rockets and stuff like that. So, like, we get into this weird area where it's like the Soviets are getting all of our info. They're building the same bombs we are. How are they getting it? And then that's where this comes in. So again, like McCarthy was dealing with, we're talking about nuclear holocaust. So to him, it might not feel like now, but to him this was some immediate, dangerous stuff.
Great Falls, Montana was the location of the U.S. Air Force Base that was used for Lend-Lease air shipments to Russia. Major George Racy Jordan was the officer in charge of this operation from 1942 to 1944. In his book, From Major Jordan's Diaries, he revealed that in addition to the expected crates of food and machinery, The Soviets also were being sent large numbers of black suitcases, which he was told were diplomatic luggage. Becoming suspicious, on one occasion he conducted a surprise inspection of these suitcases and found every one of them to be filled with such documents as maps of military installations and harbors, blueprints for weapons under development, photocopies of tens of thousands, and countless file folders bulging with official documents of the federal government. Written across the front of one folder were the words, "From Hiss." It contained hundreds of military reports. One suitcase contained scientific and engineering documents, highlighted with such strange-sounding words as fission, cyclotron, proton, neutron, heavy water, uranium. Included also was a map labeled Oak Ridge, Manhattan Engineering District. And attached to these materials was a handwritten note on official White House stationery addressed to Anastas Mikoyan, the number 3 man in the Soviet Union. The note was signed by Harry Hopkins, the American official in charge of the Lend-Lease program, President Roosevelt's personal advisor and friend. In 1943, Hopkins at the White House spoke with Major Jordan by telephone, told him to expedite a special shipment that was coming through and not to make any official record of it. When the mysterious cargo arrived, it was identified as uranium salts. The shipment was sent through, and as requested, no official record was made, except in Major Jordan's diaries. In September of 1945, a Russian code clerk named Igor Guzenko, assigned to the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, approached Canadian officials and asked for political asylum. This is the only photograph of Guzenko ever released to the public, and it was not published until after his death in 1982. While working at the Soviet embassy, Guzenko had become dismayed by the fact that his superiors already were preparing for a new war following the defeat of Germany, a war against the entire non-communist world. As a code clerk, he had access to all secret communiques, and he brought many of these with him to prove the truth of his allegations. Wearing a hood here to preserve his anonymity as a protection against reprisals, Guzenko revealed that there was a group of Canadians.
He looks like he's like one of those like weird gimmick rapper kind of guys, like MF Doom or something, or like he's like a drug dealer, and he's doing a documentary for like A&E about drugs. It's like, I can't show my face, man. Like, hey, like I'll show myself weighing my cocaine out, but not my face.
Citizens with important positions.
Has anyone ever watched Dope on Netflix? I got like this. I'm working at this new. It's sort of like it's a job, but it's only on the weekends, only for like 5 hours each night. I was just like, why not take it? And this kid was telling me about Dope on Netflix. Supposedly it's like The Wire, but it's in real life. Like it's like a documentary version of the type of things that the guys on The Wire were doing and talking about and stuff, like drug dealers and everything like that. So I heard Dope on Netflix is a great series.
Within their government, who in reality
shut up, Big Boppin'. That was funny.
Were agents of the Soviet Union. But the most electrifying disclosure of all was that the network included one of the top scientists working in cooperation with the United States on the atomic bomb project. His name was Dr. He was second in authority only to the head of the Canadian project. He had provided the Soviets with information about the secret test of the bomb, and he had delivered to them actual samples of uranium.
So there you go, right there.
When confronted with the evidence, Dr. May confessed that everything Guzenko had revealed was true.
Mm-hmm.
Another British scientist on loan to the United States was Dr. Emil Klaus Fuchs, who had been assigned to work at the top secret facility at Los Alamos.
Now, I wonder if that's where the Klaus report came from. The Klaus, that Klaus. Because, again, that Klaus report thing, it detailed a lot of this stuff. It had a section on the German bomb program. I don't know where it is. I'm not going to try to read this thing again. It's impossible to read. Oh, wait a minute. What tab was that in? But anyway, yeah, so it talked about this stuff too, and again, we're talking about things that McCarthy was citing for why he's doing all his stuff. We're just setting up. We're setting up all the context, and the chapter 2, and we'll see about chapter 3, I don't know. Those will be about the actual hearings. the first speech McCarthy did, which, did I put it on a tab? No, I didn't, but I have it. It was this speech he did to, like, the Michigan Club, or, like, some like, club of, I think, like, probably, like, rich people's club, you know, one of those social club, dinner club type things. So, yeah, we'll start with that on the chapter 2, and then we're going to go into, like, his, the committee that he had. We can watch some of the committee. We'll talk about Bentley. We'll talk about Hiss. We'll talk about those kind of people, like, in the moment of where they are. And maybe, you know what? Maybe I'll do a chapter 3, and we can base that on, like, this kind of stuff. No. This kind of stuff where we can talk about, did it work? Did McCarthyism do anything? Or did it completely fail? Did stuff actually continue right after McCarthy got done? Or did it actually have an effect? So maybe the chapter 3 will be about, like, the 60s, and I found this other video where it says there's 45 things that were on the Communist Manifesto that were signed into government in 1963. So you could say, like, maybe it did not work at all, but... Oh, you out, Commander Pepe? Oh, see you, man. Have a good night. Okay, let's...
Alamos, New Mexico. He was one of the few people at that time who had knowledge of how to construct the bomb trigger mechanism. Under questioning, Dr. Fuchs confessed that he also had been working with the Communist underground, and that he had given the Soviets drawings and detailed instructions on how to assemble and explode the atomic bomb. The confession of Dr. Fuchs led investigators to an American chemist by the name of Harry Gold, who was the man who hand-delivered the vital documents and drawings to the Soviet Vice Consul in New York. When Gold was confronted with Dr. Fuchs' testimony, he too confessed, and this led to the exposure of a network of American citizens who were in a position to channel top-secret nuclear information into Soviet hands. The trail led to David Greenglass, the man who made the actual drawings of the bomb's trigger mechanism, and to his sister, Ethel Rosenberg, and her husband, Julius, who were convicted and executed for their part in coordinating the espionage operation. At the conclusion of the trial, federal judge Irving Kaufman declared that this was the crime of the century. He said, "I have searched my conscience to find some reason for mercy. It is not in my power to forgive you." Also convicted at the same trial was Morton Sobel, who had attempted escape to Mexico to avoid prosecution. And finally, the trail of espionage led to Professor Philip Morrison, who admitted earlier Communist Party membership and who had access to virtually all secrets of the A-bomb while employed at the Manhattan Project. In retrospect,
that Manhattan Project really backfired, because their race to get the bomb just got the whole fucking world the bomb. Everyone spied on them and it worked. We can talk about that. I never have researched whether or not McCarthy was killed. I didn't even look into it. He died pretty young, but yeah, oh, well, he was an alcoholic possibly. So we'll look into that. Did I see somewhere that someone was arrested on suspicion? I thought. Anyway, yeah, I guess there is some info about McCarthy possibly being murdered, so maybe we'll either end chapter 2 with that or do that at the beginning of 3.
It is now clear that the detonation of the Soviets' first nuclear weapon in 1949 was an achievement not of research and science, but of espionage and subversion. Following the disclosure of the Soviet theft of America's nuclear technology, congressional committees began to take an interest in learning more about communist penetration into government. In 1947, for example, Louis Boudens was called to testify before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. He had served as the managing editor of the official communist newspaper, The Daily Worker, and had been a member of the party's national committee. Boudens later revealed that one of the government's most respected experts on China, Owen Lattimore, was a member of the communist underground.
In this cell, there was also Owen J. Lattimore. This I know from reports received in the Politburo and given to me officially as managing editor of the Daily Worker.
Owen Lattimore was the man who was sent to China by President Roosevelt to serve as the official U.S. advisor to Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist Chinese leader who then was struggling to prevent a communist takeover of his country.
Metal Nick just said, pretty amazing job by the commies that the only thing people remember about this time period was what a meanie doo-doo head McCarthy was. Absolutely great point. And you also got to think about the public education system and how that's sort of been like turned into this massive bureaucracy that's funneling down the whole curriculum and messing with, you know, they got everyone just going through like a machine. Like, you know that Pink Floyd song? I know it's like kind of man, but that Pink Floyd song where in The Wall, I think it's in The Wall, where they're all on the funnel and they get turned into like meat and paste and stuff. I think it's during that one song, like We Don't Need No, that song. You know, it's kind of interesting. It's symbolism of it, but kind of true. You could maybe in a way it's kind of true, but it's absolutely amazing. You know what's amazing too? I just remember this while I was getting my coffee. Actually, when I was like a kid, I went into a store. I was Target. I went into Target and I went to get like some clothes, like spring clothes or some shit like that. And I looked and I thought this shirt was so cool. It was a USSR shirt with a hammer and sickle. And it was just right on the wall among a couple other... Tim, shut the fuck up, Tim. God damn it. Why do I read chat while I talk? Anyway, it was a shirt right there. And you think like they're gonna have other shirts of countries that wanted the U.S. to be overthrown and have terrorism and everything? What makes them think that it's okay to sell hammer and sickle shirts? And you gotta wonder, like, you know... It's people. When I saw that shirt, I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man. That's awesome." I can't remember exactly, but I think I bought it. I think I wanted to buy it, and I got it. So that's such a messed up thing about the way we've all been raised and all that. We've been turned into like, guys, it's not our enemies. That's a witch hunt. They were our enemies. They wanted us gone. You see what that guy said? They're going to be raising the red flag all over the U.S., but it's not even going to be us who raises it. It's going to be the U.S. citizens themselves. And they got all this shit, the OSS going on. Like, these were evil motherfuckers who wanted us gone. Like, you know, then Target is selling to you. You think Target would sell like the Third Reich and then just a giant swastika on there? No, because those guys are really our enemies. They were pure evil, but yeah, the hammer and sickle of the USSR. The shirt says USSR. That's just amazing to me that we've had such a failure in education.
John Stuart Service was another State Department China expert who came under investigation. In 1945, Service was found responsible for transmitting hundreds of classified and top-secret documents to the staff of Amerasia magazine, a communist-controlled publication. There they were copied and transmitted to the Soviet Union. Service was reprimanded for indiscretion, but not released from employment. In fact, he was later promoted to head of the State Department's Information Service. The Senate Subcommittee on Investigations uncovered evidence of similar problems in the government printing office, where many classified documents are printed and distributed. Also in the Voice of America program, which was designed to reflect the American viewpoint through radio broadcasts in Europe. And in the American Overseas Libraries, which were part of the State Department program, supposedly to combat communist propaganda abroad. The CIA and its predecessor, the OSS, came into the spotlight on numerous occasions. In 1952, the head of the CIA, General Walter Bedell Smith, stated publicly that he was sure there were communist agents working inside his organization. No less than 3 defectors from the Soviet KGB have stated that this is so. They are Anatol Golitsyn, Yuri Nosenko, and Mikhail Golanevsky. Although their testimony has been clouded by controversy, the fact remains that there never has been an outside investigation of subversion in the CIA. The military is another critical branch of government that never has been investigated for possible communist penetration, even though there is evidence that serious problems may exist. In Italy, for example, in 1967, Giorgio Rinaldi confessed that he had been part of a Soviet underground operation involving 300 officers in NATO, some of whom were American military officers. In 1954, Lieutenant Colonel Yuri Rastorov of the Soviet Secret Police sought political asylum in the West. He had been the director of Soviet espionage operations in Tokyo. After coming to the United States, he revealed that he personally had worked with several members of the American Military Intelligence Service. In 1964, Swedish Air Force Colonel Stig Wennerstrom admitted that for 14 years he had transmitted information to the Soviets regarding nuclear strike capabilities of NATO and the United States.
So they knew where our missiles were coming from and how to dodge and how to defend themselves from our dodge. Jesus. You can't dodge missiles, but you can blow them up in midair if you know where they're all coming from.
When asked where he obtained this information, he replied that it was from the head of the American Intelligence Service at the Pentagon.
Shut up, Poppin. Shut the fuck up. You're
Turning to the
tonight.
legislative branch of government, Senator Barry Goldwater in 1975 was interviewed on television and revealed that communists had infiltrated into the office staffs of as many as 9 members of Congress. This information, he said, came from the CIA commission of which Vice President Rockefeller was a member.
I was told when I was flying to the funeral of Chiang Kai-shek with Vice President Rockefeller that his committee had learned of instances where the offices of senators had been infiltrated by Soviet agents or Soviets or something. I said, "Are you going to publish that?" He said he would, but it was never published. I asked him once why it wasn't. He said, "I was requested not to publish it." Now that you've asked me, I'm going to...
It was never revealed who requested the Vice President not to release these findings. Infiltration into legislative staffs is a major accomplishment for the Soviets. But even more important is the placement of agents into the legislature itself, men who are legally elected to office. In 1961, the House Committee on Un-American Activities published a report entitled "The New Role of National Legislative Bodies in the Communist Conspiracy." This report revealed that a number of communists, posing as Republicans or Democrats, had been successfully elected to the state legislature of Washington, the Michigan Senate, and the United States Congress, and that the Communist Party had boasted of its role in helping to elect candidates in a number of states, including California, Ohio, New York, and Illinois.
Yeah, typical states.
By the mid-1950s, the underground apparatus of the Communist Party was in serious trouble. The one thing a conspiracy cannot survive is exposure. Yet a steady stream of former communists and FBI undercover operatives gradually was exposing the entire operation to public view. This was accomplished primarily through congressional investigative committees, which put the testimony of these people into the public record. And one of the most important aspects of this history is the fact that even though the President and the heads of various government agencies repeatedly were informed by the FBI and given names with documented proof, almost never were these Soviet agents removed, and in fact, many of them were promoted until the investigative committees of Congress stepped in, made the information public, and created external pressure for action. As far as the communists were concerned, something had to be done to stop these committees, and it is the story of how they succeeded in that counterattack that we shall take up next.
There's no contest between Senator McCarthy and the Department of the Army. All that Senator McCarthy has been trying to do is expose the communists who have infiltrated the Department of the Army.
The late Senator Joseph McCarthy, in the minds of many, has become the symbol of anti-communism in America. His detractors have used the word McCarthyism to mean political hysteria and lack of concern for the rights and reputations of innocent people. His defenders view him as the fallen warrior against the hordes of pro-communists in both government and the press. It's not our purpose here to retell the McCarthy saga, but it is important to observe in passing that McCarthy's critics seldom have challenged his basic facts, choosing instead to condemn him on questions of 205 security risks in the State Department No one denied that such people were on the payroll, but they attacked him because he was not always consistent with the number of names on his list. When he said that there were pro-communist books in the overseas library program, there was no question of it, but he was condemned instead for book burning. No one denied his claim that security risks were employed at the secret testing laboratories at Fort Monmouth, but they criticized him for obtaining this information from a document he was not authorized to have. And when he charged that General Ralph Zwicker had protected and promoted a known communist in the military, his facts were never challenged. He was attacked instead for losing his temper and speaking harshly to a brigadier general.
You hear all this talk about Senator McCarthy's methods, usually in a derogatory sense, like people saying, oh, I agreed with his fight against communism and his goals, but I didn't agree with his methods.
In 1951, Roy Cohn had served as the assistant federal prosecutor in the trial of atomic bomb spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. But from 1953 to 1955, he was the chief counsel for the Senate Subcommittee on Investigations, of which Senator McCarthy was chairman.
Somebody like Bill Buckley will take the position that, well, his controversiality maybe in the long run hurt the cause and things like that. I don't buy that. Somebody had to make this fight. Senator after senator had declined to do it. It was a dangerous fight because, as we've discussed, you were taking on the media, you were taking on people with vested interests in covering up these communist activities, and it took a man who was a man to do it. And Senator McCarthy was that man. So you can say by his fearlessness and his courage, he made himself an open target for the enemy. Well, that's true. I suppose he did. But that was a risk of the game which he was willing to take, and which I think the results he achieved. And I, again, keep coming back to where we are today, because you have to view everything in perspective. If the communists had turned out to be a bunch of pussycats who held free elections in Czechoslovakia and Poland and Hungary and Bulgaria and so on and so forth, and who never went near Afghanistan, or who embraced solidarity and said, you want freedom, you've got it, I'd look like an awful fool today, and I wish I did. But unfortunately, history has proved the opposite, that what we were yelling about 25 years ago has all come true, and there isn't that much left of the free world.
No, so this documentary, again, it's probably from, it looks to be the 60s to the 80s. 80s might be a little bit late. It looks like the 70s to me. I don't know. So this is also a Cold War time. And, you know, there was some Afghanistan. So wait, when did the Russians enter Afghanistan? USSR invasion of Afghanistan. Let's see. 1978. No. Yep, 1979 to 1989. So this was made sometime after 1979. Looks like late 70s. You think late 80s? It might be. Maybe it is. Who knows?
Regardless of the controversy surrounding the career of Joseph McCarthy, regardless and above all others, the destruction of his political career and the placement of the word McCarthyism into the American vocabulary was the turning point in the fortunes of the Soviet underground. From that moment forward, any outspoken anti-communist could be discredited in the public mind merely by labeling him a McCarthyite.
Yep. By the way, did
The
you
next
guys
phase
ever
of
get any of this info in school? Because I did not. I did not hear anything about why McCarthy did anything he did. All I heard was like they set it up like in... So then McCarthy came along and he was evil. And here's all the victims of McCarthy. Like, here's every person who McCarthy fucked over, and there's no conclusive proof they were a communist. But they didn't even set none of this up. You talked about how, like, the Soviets were the allies in World War II, and then, you know, oh, then we had the Cold War, and it was stupid to have the Cold War. It's like, you don't, no, fuck off. Fuck, I hate that. I hate school. Yeah, public school, it pisses me off. That's why I'm glad to do this, and I'm not going to tell that side of the story, because everyone already knows that side. You can go, like, watch basically anything by any mainstream documentary maker or whatever if you want the other side. I'm just going to tell it, like all the stuff that was left out for us.
The campaign against internal security was to convince the general public that communism is not an internal threat to the United States, but that investigative agencies of our own government are. Members of the Soviet underground have worked diligently to promote this point of view through a host of non-communist organizations which they control. Their public pronouncements do not call for the defense of communism, which would be unpopular, but instead for the protection of civil liberties, freedom of association, and the right to political dissent. One of the first organizations to serve this function was the American Civil Liberties Union. It was formed in 1920 by Roger Baldwin, who publicly advocated the right to overthrow the government by force and violence. He also said, "I am for socialism, disarmament, and ultimately the abolishing of the state itself. Communism is, of course, the goal." In a letter to an associate, Baldwin gave this advice. He said, "We want also to look like patriots in everything we do. We want to get a good lot of flags, talk a great deal about the Constitution and what our forefathers wanted to make of this country, and to show that we are the folks that really stand for the spirit of the Constitution."
Fucking subversion guy.
Among the founding membership of the ACLU were such notables as William Foster, who later became the head of the above-ground Communist Party, USA. Felix Frankfurter, who later became a Supreme Court justice. Dr. Harry Ward, of the spokesman for the Communist Party.
Dude, I always wonder that same thing, JM. It's like, what are you guys doing? Why would you want no guns? Like, you want to have a revolution. Don't you need guns? Where else are you going to get them from? Well, maybe they have them shipped in. You know, the IRA, you know who gave arms to the IRA? It was, it was from Libya. It was from Gaddafi. Because Gaddafi was pissed off at the way they were shitting all over him down there. And he heard about IRA, he wants to break off from Britain. So, hey, I'm going to arm the shit out of them because, you know, I want the UK to have a lot of trouble. So Gaddafi from Libya, that's where they got all those guns.
It was inevitable that the ACLU would become the first non-communist organization to oppose the investigative committees. It carried out a public opinion campaign in favor of the censure of Senator McCARTHY, and by 1960 had made the abolition of the House Committee on Un-American Activities one of its primary objectives. One of the functions of the ACLU is to provide free legal services. Most of its officials are lawyers, and many of them belong to an organization known as the National Lawyers Guild. The National Lawyers Guild was formed in 1937 with the assistance of the American branch of an agency of the Soviet Comintern.
Oh, Tim. Well, I'll believe you, Tim. You're like a smart guy, so. Tim said the IRA got more guns from America and explosives from Libya.
It has been described by the communists themselves as a transmission belt for the Soviet underground. A committee of Congress officially declared it to be the legal bulwark of the Communist Party. Members of the
Test. Reconnection successful. Yo, can you hear me? Just let me know when you can hear me and we'll keep going. I don't know what the hell happened, man. I don't know what is going on with my shit lately. Alright.
One of the members of that team was Ramsey Clark.
Oh, thank God, because I hate when it goes down for more than 5 minutes. When it goes down for more than 5 minutes, it starts a new stream over. Oh, so annoying. Alright.
Former Attorney General of the United States. Perhaps the most conspicuous group within the National Lawyers Guild has been the New York law firm of Rabinowitz, Boudin. For the 1970 Symbionese and terrorists, the Black Panther Party, the American Indian Movement, and the Symbionese Liberation Army. In 1975, William Kunstler and other members of the National Lawyers Guild offered their support to the leaders of the West German terrorist Red Army Fraction, better known as the Baader-Meinhof Gang. They even attempted to send a team of lawyers to Germany to aid in their legal defense. One of the members of that team was Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General of the United States. Perhaps the most conspicuous group within the National Lawyers Guild has been the New York law firm of Rabinowitz, Boudin and Standard. Leonard Boudin is the father of Kathy Boudin, one of the leaders of the Weather Underground organization. Victor Rabinowitz, his law partner, has been identified as a member of the Communist Party. and their law firm is an official agent of Cuba in United States courts. By the early 1950s, the Communist...
I don't know why you guys are buffering. Is some people not buffering, though? Because... Really? I'm not getting any lag. My lag just went totally away. It's just straight green. 0 dropped frames. I'm not dropping any frames. So, like, I don't know why it would be lagging. My little window here isn't lagging. I can see myself looking down, looking up. That's weird.
Party had launched 3 additional organizations designed to build public opposition to the investigation of communism. The first of these fronts was called the Civil Rights Congress, which used the theme of defending minority
okay, thanks, Lando.
rights as a means of raising money for the legal defense of Communist Party leaders. The second was the National Committee to Abolish the Un-American Activities Committee.
Oh, okay, Eastwood, thanks, dude. And yeah, it was fun having you on last time. It was a good time. Thanks for coming on.
Which 7 of the 13 national officers were identified members of the Communist Party. The third was the Emergency Civil Liberties Committee, officially cited in 1958 as a communist front. Frank Wilkinson has been an organizer for both the National Committee to Abolish the Un-American Activities Committee and the Emergency Civil Liberties Committee. On 2 separate occasions, he has been identified in congressional hearings as a member of the Communist Party. Wilkinson currently is head of a new organization, the National Committee Against Repressive Legislation, and is sought after as a public speaker, particularly on college campuses, where he is presented merely as an advocate of civil liberties. Let us turn now to an actual event to see how these people and organizations have been able to achieve their objective. The event was a public hearing before the House Committee on Un-American Activities held in San Francisco on May 12, 1960. The purpose of the hearing was to gather testimony regarding the influence of the Communist Party in the San Francisco area. Frank Wilkinson is one of the first organizers to arrive on the scene. Working through a group, American Freedoms, he helps coordinate the distribution of thousands of copies of his speech by Congressman James Roosevelt, in which the House Committee on Un-American Activities...
Well, have you had anything to do with the demonstrations in front of the City Hall today?
No, I've just been an observer of those.
I understand.
Wilkinson and other members of the Soviet apparatus in California formulate a 4-point strategy for attack against the committee. First, they will generate public opposition to the hearing. Secondly, they will pack the hearing room with people who are hostile to the committee.
See, what they're talking about here is how an example of how they subvert. Just in this is using one single case.
Drawing heavily upon radicalized students from the university. Third, they will disrupt the hearing with tactics of open defiance, forcing the police to use crowd control measures to reestablish order. Fourth, they will treat utilizing news coverage of the action as evidence that repressive measures are used against innocent protesters.
Now, also think of this kind of thing. Think about, like, today's world, too. And I'm going to play a quick little video in just a second that's called What is the Hegelian Dialectic? And we've watched it a couple times way back earlier this winter, but it goes along with this.
The packing of the hearing room comes off exactly as planned. The handful crowd that comes not to listen, but to protest. When the room is filled to capacity and hundreds are turned away, communist agitators seize upon this as a propaganda device to disrupt the meeting. From left to right, we see Ralph Izzard, Archie Brown, Sally Etarian Sweet, and Saul Wachter.
Open the doors! Open the doors! What are you hiding? What are you hiding? We have nothing to hide. What are you hiding? Let the people in over here. Then get out, you un-American. That's what you should do. Pack up and get out. You Open the doors. Here comes the Goose Squad. This is Americanism. Watch this Americanism in action. Wow, watch this Americanism in action. Watch this Americanism.
Douglas Wachter, son of Sal Wachter, is a communist-trained student organizer at the Berkeley campus of the University of California. He also was an official delegate to the Communist Party's recent annual convention. Pleading the Fifth Amendment when asked about his party membership, he presents himself not as an agent of a foreign power, but as a patriot whose only concern is to defend the Constitution.
I cannot cooperate with the committee in answering any such questions. I feel I have an obligation as a citizen of this country to preserve the Constitution, and I do not feel I can do so in good conscience by allowing the House Un-American Activities Committee to inquire into my beliefs or associations.
On the second day of the hearings, California State Assemblyman Philip Burton addresses a rally of protesters and calls for the abolition of the committee. His sister-in-law, Michelle Burton, was an official delegate to the 1962 Communist World Youth Festival in Helsinki. Burton himself has established a long record of support for officially cited Communist Front organizations. Philip Burton later would become a member of the United States Congress. But what is the best way to sell?
It took me a long time to find this. Now, this is also an older documentary. It's a little clip from a documentary. It's only 7 minutes long. But this is extreme... Oh, no, not again, not again. I just got a lag spike. No, I'm good. So this is an older clip. It's very... Oh, see you 5 Iron. Take care, man. It's an older clip. It's from an old documentary. I said that like 4 times now. Anyways, take this info and you can apply it to almost anything. If you think like the general idea that's trying to tell you is that from the top, when you're like one of the elite people and you want more power and you want people more suppressed down there, what you do is you create a problem. You can do that using the media. You can employ student groups. You can prey on people's good intentions, whatever you want to do. Then you have a reaction that you don't necessarily control the reaction. It might just happen naturally because you're trying to create the problem. And then you present the solution. And the solution is always more control, because control makes people feel protected and like things are more predictable. So that's what this is going to be about.
Big government and then world government to a people like ours. But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours?
And big government, world government, you can take this and just apply it right to, you know, workers of the world unite type thing.
Historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers. The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace. If those who seek world dominion can stimulate leftist mobs into violent confrontation with local law enforcement, and also provide exhaustive news coverage so that the entire nation can see and tremble, then the peaceful and freedom-loving majority can be programmed to accept a vast expansion of government powers and even a national police force.
Now, you can also apply this to modern things all the time. For example, do you remember the whole controversy about YouTube where they said, oh, so people are uploading Coca-Cola's advertisement played before an ISIS video. Like, people are uploading ISIS videos on YouTube. We need to do something about it. Now, mind you, these videos had like 3 views. And also, like, they weren't, it's like, who, you know what, take the videos down when they get reported. But we need to do something big about this because this is happening all the time. It's terrible. So, okay, our solution is going to be, now we got a bunch of algorithms and we got more AI taking down of videos. Here, we're going to introduce this limited state thing for videos where you can't comment, you can't like, dislike, you can't even click on the channel where it comes from. It doesn't come up in the search, etc. Now, has that all been used just for ISIS videos? No. That's been used for, like, pretty much anything you can think of from the even far left or the far right, it's getting used for that kind of stuff. Yeah, leftist channels got affected bad by the adpocalypse. That guy Kyle something from Secular Report or Secular Talk, he got fucking wiped out. And you know who didn't? Young Turks. So it's not even just right wing. It's also just whoever isn't towing the line, whoever is going to be unpredictable and might take a stance that you don't want them to take and influence all their viewers to think differently about a stance that these major parties are standing for. So, So anyway, so that's the problem. Like ISIS videos, reaction, oh, it's fucking horrible. Solution, do all this stuff, and then use that new law that you got put in to abuse the shit out of it. Another example, really quick, and I'll keep playing it. Remember the Florida shooting? How all of a sudden the sheriff goes up there and starts to lobby, I guess. He starts to lobby for the Baker Act, which the Baker Act is where you take somebody because you think that they might do something bad, and you put them mandatorily. They don't have a choice. You put them in like a institution or a mental facility for like however long you think they need to be in there. No warrant, no crime was done, nothing like that. It's just we suspect that you'd probably do something bad. So that's the problem, is that, oh, it might be another mass shooting somewhere. Reaction, oh, what are we going to do? We need to do something about the solution. Well, here's like the Baker Act. And you think that's not going to get abused? Come on.
Offered supposedly to end the violence. If those who seek world dominion can raise the specter of an enemy armed to the teeth with superior atomic weapons on the verge of launching a nuclear holocaust, and also offer world government as the prevention, then millions of Americans can be programmed to accept the loss of national sovereignty as our last best hope for peace. This is the meaning of pressure from above and below. To put over police-state measures at home, they need chaos, crime, and anarchy in the streets. To sell the idea of world government, they need the constant threat of nuclear war. Or, as they say in revolutionary circles, the real action is in the reaction.
What's up, Porcelain?
In 1968,
nice
Random House Incorporated published this book by James Coonan, The Strawberry Statement, Notes of a College Revolutionary.
They're about to give you an example about how this was used back in like the 60s or 70s with black student unions and who was funding them. And the unions think they're all doing this stuff on their own and everything, but you'll see how they get influence.
Coonan carries the usual New Left credentials and is a classic example of the extent to which a highly intelligent mind can be programmed by the establishment into thinking that it is acting against the establishment. Coonan was one of the leading participants in the first student seizure of an American university, which occurred at Columbia in April of 1968. Initially, the movement was not large and easily could have been stopped by a simple police action. But as usual, the anti-establishment forces received their greatest help from the establishment itself. For several days, police were told not to interfere. Meanwhile, university officials groveled in the face of outrageous propaganda charges, and the media made national heroes of the rebelling students. MGM even made a movie out of Coonan's book. On page 130, Coonan wrote, "In the evening I went up to the U to check out a strategy meeting. A kid was giving a report on the SDS convention. He said that at the convention, men from Business International roundtables, the meeting sponsored by Business International for their client groups and heads of government, tried to buy up a few radicals. They offered to finance our demonstrations in Chicago. We were also offered ESSO, or Rockefeller money. They want us to make a lot of radical commotion so they can look more in the center as they move to the left." Jerry Kirk, while a student at the University of Chicago, was active in the SDS, the Du Bois Club, the Black Panthers, and the Communist Party. In 1969, Mr. Kirk broke from the party, and the following year testified before the House and Senate Internal Security Committees. Here is what Mr. Kirk has told us. Young people have no conception of the conspiracy's strategy of pressure from above and pressure from below. They have no idea that they're playing into the hands of the establishment they claim to hate. The radicals think they're fighting the forces of the super-rich, like Rockefeller and Ford, and don't realize that it is precisely such forces which are behind their own revolution, financing it, and using it for their own purposes. When Stokely Carmichael was head of the militant revolutionary group known as SNCC, he was invited to speak at the University of Chicago. Jerry Kirk, then still a Black Panther, was among those who attended, and here is how he described Carmichael's appearance. Mr. Carmichael was obviously in the middle of something rather important, which made him more nervous and more tense than in the past. He started speaking of things which he said he could not have said before, because his research was not finished. He spoke of the false consciousness of many blacks who believed the Jews were the instrument of oppression of blacks. And he made note of the fact that even though many Jewish people, for example in New York, own quite a bit of land, one must understand that the overwhelming percentages of mortgages in Harlem was owned not by Jewish people, but by Morgan Guarantee Trust, the Morgan family, and Chase Manhattan Bank, the Rockefellers. He repeated the line from the song he liked so well. Something is happening here, but you don't know quite what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? What he was getting at was that the Jews were simply one strata of society who are themselves being oppressed by people who were much richer and much more powerful. In the agencies of this power, he cited banks, the chief among which were Morgan Guarantee Trust and Chase Manhattan, and the foundations connected with these monoliths. It was not long after this that Stokely Carmichael mysteriously was ousted from both SNCC and the Black Panthers. Apparently, he had learned too much. More and more young radicals are beginning to wake up to the fact that their entire lives have been carefully programmed by the very people who are their hate symbols. They're beginning to realize that their so-called anti-establishment outlook actually is the calculated product of the establishment press, the establishment communications media, the establishment entertainment industry, the establishment schools. Rich men's corporations publish and pop...
You know, that whole thing with the Mexican, the children, the families breaking apart, you know, that's been happening. That didn't just start happening. It's been happening since Obama time. It's been happening, like, forever. But did you notice that the whole media all of a sudden just starts talking about it like this is the issue now? All of a sudden, like, just blows up into, like, this major... Every platform's got to talk about it. You know, talk about it all day long. That guy at Womp Womp Guy, that guy has showed up on my Chromecast news thing. Usually a story will be there for like a day or two, and then it goes to some news stories. That guy showed up like yesterday, and it said like Corey Lewandowski womp womp over a girl who's got Down syndrome. They're running that thing, keep running it, and then what did that result in? A bunch of protests. And who funded like all those Test. Dude, what the hell? Why is this all starting to do this like this? Okay. Okay, here we go. We're back.
Rich men's corporations
This video is almost over, and we'll go back to a little more of that documentary, and then we'll call it a night.
Publish and popularize revolutionary books and songs. Through advertising, rich men's businesses subsidize revolutionary magazines. Rich men's tax-exempt foundations pour millions of dollars into left-wing organizations. The federal establishment in Washington, through agencies like the OEO, provide weekly paychecks to thousands of hardcore revolutionaries. And so we return again to the basic question, why? Why does the establishment publicly condemn but privately support the anti-establishment movement? Former communist Jerry Kirk answers, the idea is to create a situation where the people are so frightened of the violence all around them that they will throw their hands up in the air and demand, federal government, do something. And the only choice open will be martial law. The communists, black militants, and revolutionaries will never succeed in overthrowing the government of the United States. But unless they are stopped, they will scare the American people into accepting socialism from Washington and statist rule by the insiders of the establishment. This is what it is really all about.
Okay, so that's just a little tidbit there. All right, let's do a little more of this, and then I think we'll probably wrap it up. And then the next chapter 2, we will get McCarthy's. McCarthy walks in onto the scene, what he did first, why everyone went crazy, and we'll go into the committee, and then we'll go into the Hollywood blacklist, because that's a big factor in it. The Hollywood blacklist is kind of where you can really make a case where it's like, McCarthy, like you know, these aren't people trading nuclear secrets. They're just assholes. Like, they're just idealist dopes who think they're gonna be the, you know, they want to work on the farm and just shovel and, you know, throw people they don't like in the gulag and stuff.
William Mandel is a well-known news commentator over radio
Yeah, Mark Glista. We just actually watched that like a week or two ago. It was pretty good.
Station KPFA. In due course, he is called to testify about evidence of his role in the Communist Party as an instructor in tactics.
If you think that I am going to cooperate with this collection of Judases, of men who sit there in violation of the United States Constitution, if you think I'll cooperate with you in any way, you are insane.
Remember what he said, though? He told him, in that ACLU memo, we are to act like we're the patriots. We're to act like we are defending the Constitution and everything, but we're out to destroy it.
The question has no purpose other than to harass me. When I was asked this question last in 1943 by the late Joe McCarthy, and let me say that I am honored when people come up to me on the streets, perhaps I don't deserve this honor, and say, you're the man who killed Joe McCarthy. Because I happened to appear on the first day of the book-burning hearing, and I did my best to conduct myself in the manner which I'm conducting myself today. If there were any such evidence against me under any law, the proper authorities could move against me. This body is improperly constituted. It is a kangaroo court. It does not have my respect. It has my utmost contempt. And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
By noon of the second day, the unruly crowd has grown to such proportions that it now blocks access to other rooms in the City Hall, and the jeering and chanting interfere with proceedings in courtrooms on the third floor.
Well, even back then they were doing this.
It is inevitable
bullshit.
that the judges are compelled to register official complaints with the police, who now have no choice but to ask the demonstrators to leave. Taking orders from their leaders, the crowd refuses to budge, even in the face of fire hoses.
Those are the good old days. You just fire
The
hose the
result is a
crowd to get
media
them out of
event
there.
of great proportions, as the protesters are unceremoniously removed, one by one.
Get lost. Oh no.
The
that's
final
not-
phase of the
that's not
strategy, as
good.
you recall, was to force the police into using crowd control measures, which then could be offered as evidence of alleged police-state brutality against innocent and peaceful demonstrators. And so it was. The People's World, the official communist newspaper in San Francisco, prepared a special supplement which was widely distributed on college campuses and to waterfront workers. Thousands of leaflets also were distributed entitled From Blackmail to Blackjack. The leaflets said that students were peacefully demonstrating and defending the most cherished American freedoms when fire hoses, clubs, and blackjacks were used against them, without warning and without provocation, to browbeat and smash the public opposition to the House Committee on Un-American Activities. The same theme, in one variation or another, also was carried in much of the nation's non-communist press. Well, that was 1960. By the 1970s, the campaign against internal security had greatly expanded in terms of the number of people and organizations involved, in terms of professionalism and sophistication, and also in terms of objectives, because by this time, the target of attack had broadened to include not only the investigative committees of Congress, but all intelligence gathering operations. In our next program, The Open Gates of Troy.
So do you think if there's ever a state in the U.S. that went sovereign ethno-state, do you think the increased social cohesion and sense of community will lead to socialized health like you see in Switzerland, Canada, or do you think American culture is so capitalistic it wouldn't fly? Well, that would become like the new issue. That's the thing. There's such a divide. You got like the libertarian side of alt-right people, and you got the national socialist people. And I've heard them debate things with each other, and to me, often the national socialist person generally sounds more appealing, oddly enough, because they see it as like, the only reason that you don't want to do that now is because there's a lot of people who won't like pay into the system and all that, but they cite, like, I think they had all kinds of shit, like Nazi Germany, they had like free college and free health, they had all kinds of stuff, but they also forced their citizens to be in shape. They're like, the health plan and everything. So that's an interesting question. It would just be an issue. It'd be the new debate. It'd be like the news would be running like, hey, here's the NatSoc guy, here's the libertarian alt-right guy, and let you two, like, that would be the new thing for them to decide. And yet, well, never mind about that, but, okay, so, let's see what their next section is about here, because I haven't gotten this far. Did that say George Foundation Advisory Board and Directors, Major General George S. Patton? He obviously was not alive for this. I don't know. 1983, there we go, 1983.
What they were doing there was making bombs. They were making anti-personnel bombs. They were taking 4 or 5 sticks of dynamite, hundreds of heavy nails, and taping the nails on the outside of the dynamite so that when it exploded, it would send those nails out in every direction, and of course any one like a bullet, so they would have killed hundreds of people had they been successful.
But because of my activities and other people's activities, the weathermen had to spend a lot of time trying to determine who the informants were, who the police agents were, and this distracted them from their goals.
The two disinformation departments, again under the supervision of the Soviets, decided to start a long-term operation against the CIA.
I believe in the naming of the names of CIA people working abroad.
I think anybody who thinks that the Communist Party of the United States is a serious threat to the security of the United States in any way.
Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
In the 1st century BC, it was the Roman poet Virgil who immortalized the story of the Trojan horse. After 10 years of warfare, the Greeks hadn't been able to breach the impenetrable walls around the Trojan city of Troy. Finally, they devised a scheme for accomplishing through trickery what they could not achieve by military might. They built a large wooden statue of a horse and placed it outside the city gates supposedly as an offering to the gods and a tribute to the Trojans, who were led to believe within its wooden belly. That night, while the Trojans slept with pleasant dreams of peace, the soldiers crept from their hiding place.
Wait, Jeff, are you referring to me? I was just trying to answer Elemento's question in the situation that he upholded. I hope this isn't coming off like, oh yeah, Germany was awesome because USSR was bad. I mean, obviously both were the U.S.'s enemies. There's an interesting talk, though, Pat Buchanan. I just saw somebody post, it was a Fez in Discord. Fez posted this interesting talk about Pat Buchanan was on an anti-war show, and he said that even World War II was an unnecessary war. I don't know what his, info was or anything, but, I don't know. So, some people do say that we shouldn't even have done that.
Overpowered the few sentries who remained on guard, and from the inside opened the gates of Troy. Legions of warriors waiting on the outside rushed into the defenseless city, and roaming through the streets at will, massacred the population. When they left, it is said that every building had been destroyed, and no living thing remained behind. Now, there is much in common between the ancient city of Troy and the United States of America. In the past, our walls have been impenetrable against the armies of all hostile foreign powers.
Yeah, because like you said, it's sympathetic to socialized healthcare. Yeah, because the interesting thing with them is they really, really know how to paint capitalism as this huge problem where everything that the people on the alt-right all agree with, they can paint that as those problems have only come into our life because capitalism, because, you bring tons of immigrants in for less, you got to pay them less. You get to pay them, you can pay them under minimum wage if you want. You can do all kinds of like that because, they're big businesses. Once they get so massive, they pretty much can just lobby the government for what they want. And so, this whole thing with, they can show you that, of your side, your libertarian side, you're fighting to have all these freedoms that you also have been put in the situation you're in because of those freedoms. It's weird. It's weird. It's like you just listen to, National Socialist versus Libertarian alt-right. If you type that in, you'll probably find something.
But now we're told that there no longer is any danger because our enemy has mellowed and gone. Is it possible that we too have been lulled into pleasant dreams of peace, while there are those who even now overpower our sentries and pull upon our gates from the inside? The answer to that question is the subject of this program.
We'll watch a little bit of this one. I'll probably end it soon.
In part one, entitled Moles in High Places, we posed the proposition that America's retreat from victory since the end of World War II was the result not of a confusion factor, but of the subversion factor. We reviewed the official Soviet strategy for utilizing subversion as a method of conquest from within. We took a look at the record of early communist success in penetrating into the highest levels of our government. We saw how these disclosures were met with indifference or hostility from the executive branch, the courts, and Congress itself.
Dude, Spencer has kind of gone off the rails. I don't know, have you seen some of his most recent stuff? You gotta watch this video. I'll show you. I'll give you a link to it. True Dill Tom, Richard Spencer abandoned. Here it is. Yeah, check out this video because he is now promoting there's something called absolutism, and this video is a little bit over-explanatory, but check this video out when you have free time, because Spencer is now saying that that the white man's burden, that he calls it, is just going to always be there, and I'm not even an ethno-nationalist anymore because sorry guys, even if we become an ethno-state, we're still going to have to help out everyone else around the world, so we might as well not become one and just be supremacist of what we have here. Like, I don't know, it's a weird thing he's doing now. It's all of a sudden it's different.
We saw men who were blatant security risks continue to rise in federal employment. And finally, we documented the process by which the Soviet underground in the 1960s...
Yeah, Trudeau Tom's pretty good. He's Australian.
...launched a successful campaign to disrupt and discredit the investigative committees of Congress. By the 1970s, the drive against internal security was ready for the next stage of development. In June of 1971, Daniel Ellsberg and Anthony Russo of the Rand...
Oh yeah, no problem, Woodhawk. Thanks, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, part 2 should be more focused on McCarthy, so... Oh no, Zanhead, what did you just upload? I just got a notification. Tipper explains the Brian Gill, our meme and the JRT situation. Oh shit. Yeah, check out Zanhead's channel. He just put up a clip. That's funny, dude.
And Corporation were charged with espionage and theft of government property when they delivered for publication certain highly classified documents, which became known as the Pentagon Papers. The publishing of these documents provided the Soviets with an effective anti-American propaganda weapon in Southeast Asia, and also gave them the key to our secret diplomatic code, a key they could use to decipher hundreds of older messages recorded and stored for just such a breakthrough. Ellsberg and Russo claimed that freedom of the press gave them the right to obtain and publish these documents. A team of National Lawyers Guild attorneys was assembled for their defense, and the head of this team was Leonard Boudin of the law firm Rabinowitz, Boudin and Standard, a registered agent of Cuba. Also active in the defense was an organization called the Institute for Policy Studies, sometimes described as a think tank for the left. The Institute for Policy Studies is headquartered in Washington, D.C. It has served as a clearinghouse for disgruntled or disloyal government employees to leak information to the press that will damage our diplomatic or military operations in other countries. One of the founders of the Institute for Policy Studies was Richard Barnett. In his book, Intervention and Revolution, Barnett describes communist movements and terrorist campaigns around the world as being merely local struggles for power with no connection to the Soviet Union.
I'll look that up, Century of the Self. Why does that sound so familiar? I'll look it up, but yeah, we can maybe watch watch it in parts. Do like an hour of it one night, switch to other clips people add. You know, another hour, we could do like something like that.
It is Barnett's position that the Soviet KGB is not aggressive in these activities, and that local communist leaders are independent of Moscow. In his book entitled The Economy of Death, he wrote, "If a country in Asia, Africa, or Latin America goes communist, the Soviet Union..."
Sorry, I keep pausing it. You know what? We actually watched something that was made by Braving Ruin. It's called How Individualism Ate Itself, I think is the name of it. And it pulls from Century of the Self a lot. Now that I'm seeing what Century of the Self is, it's got a lot of clips from it in there, and it's only an hour long. It was pretty good. Yeah, there's the exact interviews he played on that right in this one.
Or China does not necessarily benefit. Revolutionary regimes, even communist ones, do not make the United States any weaker militarily or the communist powers any stronger. One of the goals of the Institute for Policy Studies has been to weaken and neutralize the CIA. This is also a goal of the KGB. In spite of the fact that the CIA already may have been compromised by communist agents within its ranks, and in spite of the fact that in many countries it has supported the worst possible non-communist leaders among the contenders, still, in some countries, the CIA has done much to slow down communist progress. And as long as it remains in operation, there is always a chance that it could do great future damage to Soviet plans.
I believe in the naming of the names of CIA people working abroad, or in the United States for that matter, because I think that people around the world ought to know, as a matter of principle, with whom they're dealing. That is, if they're dealing...
The name of Philip Agee has become synonymous with the drive against the CIA. Agee had been a CIA operations officer in Latin America. He resigned in 1969 and began work on his book entitled Inside the Company, CIA Diary, which became an international bestseller in 1975. The theme of his book was simple. The CIA is on the side of evil, engaged in a senseless and cruel campaign against an imaginary threat of communism. A.G. frankly supports the activities of the KGB and even complains that the Soviets are not doing enough in the area of secret operations. In the conclusion of his book, A.G. revealed his personal ideology. He said, "Reforms of the FBI and the CIA." In the June 1975 issue of Esquire magazine, A.G. was even more blunt when he said, "I aspire to be a communist and a revolutionary." In 1977, A.G. was deported from Britain for his activities on behalf of the KGB. One of the persons who came to his legal defense was Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General of the United States. As early as 1974, Philip A.G. had become associated with a periodical called Counterspy, which published the names and addresses of CIA officers stationed in other countries.
I believe that by exposing the identities of
Oh, god damn it, now I muted it. Okay, guys, so I added both those at least the delay is not that bad. I added both those documentaries. I put all 4 parts of Century South, so maybe we'll look into it. We did watch that Braving Rune thing, so it kind of like just packaged it up into an hour. So maybe we will check out a little bit of it, but we probably already seen it. But the Corporation, I added that one, and then Bud. So yeah, Bud, I read your DM. I probably forgot to respond, but she's got to send it first. She got to send the feet pic first, and she got to send it in main chat, and she can't delete it. So those are the rules. It has to be there for at least 30 seconds, and she's got to be wearing heels in it. Then she can send 3 porn photos, but I am deleting those after she sends them. That's the rule. That's the rule, or else she can't do it. And if she does try to do it, because you try to work some deal out with her, I'm taking it out on you. That's the rule. She's got to do it just like that.
Of CIA officers abroad, it will make it that much harder for presidents of the United States, through the CIA, to install the Pinochets.
Oh, you got it on record. You got it on clip. You got it in audio.
Of today and tomorrow.
One of the names published by Counterspy was Richard Welch, attached to the U.S. Embassy in Athens, Greece. Shortly after his name was revealed, Welch was ambushed and killed by local terrorists. Similar assassination attempts have been made on U.S. officials in other countries immediately following the public disclosure of their names. In July of 1978, Philip A.G. traveled to Cuba to participate in the 11th Communist World Youth Festival. While there, he announced the formation of a new publication called the Covert Action Information Bulletin. An editorial in the first issue stated, "We will never stop exposing CIA personnel and operations whenever and wherever we find them." It's likely that some of the names released by the Covert Action Bulletin actually were CIA officers working under cover of other occupations, but many were not. In fact, one source for acquiring these names was the Soviet disinformation departments of East Germany and Czechoslovakia. One of the men responsible for compiling this list before seeking political asylum in the West was Vladislav Dittman, the officer in charge of the Department of Disinformation in Czechoslovakia.
The 2 disinformation departments, again under the supervision of the Soviets, decided to start a long-term operation against the CIA, making life as hard as possible for CIA. That is to label many American diplomats, politicians, cultural representatives abroad as CIA agents and paralyze their positions. Specifically in 1966, the first major operation was to prepare a book which is called Who is Who in CIA. Shortly after coming to the United States, I found this book in many bookstores. I have it at home. Covert Action Bulletin, or...
Is this AG's group, the group?
Yes, that's right.
Philip
It's
AG.
one of the major sources of information about CIA man. That's, of course, that's ironic, because that is a communist disinformation.
Another anti-security organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. is called Security Studies. It is directed by Morton Halperin, who traveled to England with Ramsey Clark to assist in the legal defense of Philip Agee. Halperin previously had been employed in the National Security Council as the senior assistant to Henry Kissinger. Halperin, in fact, was the man who personally prepared the Pentagon Papers for the government before they were illegally transmitted to the press. Later, he spent 5 months working with Leonard Boudin and other members of the National Lawyers Guild as a special consultant in the defense of Ellsberg and Rousseau.
We heard about that National Lawyers Guild, too.
Mr. Halperin has become another prominent spokesman for the point of view that there is no threat of communism, that we can best combat the secret operations of the KGB by ourselves doing everything in the open, and that there is no need for us to be concerned over Marxist-Leninist movements in any country.
Absurd. The notion that there is a Marxist-Leninist conspiracy in the world, in light of the very, very substantial differences between various countries who call themselves Marxist-Leninists, is absurd. I think the only people left who take Marxist-Leninism seriously are American right-wingers who have a need for...
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
...a conspiracy opposed to them. And I think
during our interview, Mr. Halperin remained soft-spoken and composed while discussing questions of civil liberties and constitutional rights. But when we asked him about the Communist Party connections of his associate Leonard Boudin, this was his reply.
That's absolute nonsense, and you know that's absolute nonsense. Mr. Boudin can speak for himself about his past affiliations, but I think that's, first of all, totally irrelevant to the question of the defense of Daniel Ellsberg, and also absolute nonsense.
Leonard Boudin has been a member of the National Lawyers Guild probably for the last 30 to 35 years. He's been...
Mr. John Reese is editor and publisher of Information Digest, an internationally recognized...
Das Acid. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'll see you later. Come back for the second one if you're around. Should be more like McCarthy focused. And I think I'm going to end it in like a minute or two. Let this little section play out, because we're kind of getting into like post-McCarthy stuff, I think, anyway. So, yeah, I didn't know there was a penguin emoji. Nice. I like that. I like that penguin emoji. It's cool. Why is it blue, though? Alright, anyway. Let's finish this out.
Bi-weekly report specializing in matters of Soviet covert operations against the United States and the free world.
It's very interesting to note that in the trial of William Miller and Mark Felt, who were two senior officials of the FBI, harassed in the courts under the Carter administration for their efforts to stop terrorism, a stipulated document was entered into the court record which said that Leonard Boudin...
What the hell is Can You Quack? What is that? The hell is this? This might be this is copyright. This is copyright. This is licensed by someone. Here comes. Okay. No. No. Fuck that. We can listen to it.
Can you quack? Can you quack like a duck when you suck? Can you buck like a horse when we fuck? Can you take every inch of your butt? Can you shit on my chest for good luck? Can you quack?
Oh my god, some guy's going up to
quack
grab
like
it.
A duck when you suck? Can you fart on my balls when we fuck? Can
Oh God, good God, what is that guy? What is he? Why? I guess that's a selling gimmick, though. I mean, it's got 663K views, and then on another video, you got another 500,000 views. Hey, maybe that's just all it takes.
Had been a secret member of the Communist Party USA. Now, I think this is important, Mr. Griffin, that it was a stipulated document, and that in legal terms, I understand, is one that was agreed by both the attorneys for the defense and for the prosecution.
Mr. Halperin denies that the Communist Party is an arm of international conquest. He portrays it as merely another political party, interested only in sharing power, not capturing it.
I think the Communist Party is, like the Republican Party, a political party. I think there may have been people in it, as there may have been people in other political groups, who took orders from foreign powers and who may have violated some laws of the United States. And if they did, the government has the right to investigate them.
Anyone can become a Republican or Democrat. Could anyone join the Communist Party?
I did not understand the function of this interview was to discuss the Communist Party, and I don't think I have anything useful to say on this subject.
Now these people come up and they advocate something, but they don't advocate it as a communist. They advocate it as a distinguished professor or a former Foreign Service officer or somebody who served in the National Security Council, and they're taken at face value with what they're saying. And they are succeeding in making a wrong presentation of the state of the world today. And I say give them all the liberty in the world, but identify them so that when they do talk, we know who they are, and that it's the voice of Moscow speaking and not the voice of our American academia.
In January of 1977, Morton Halperin became chairman of a new organization called the Campaign for Political Rights. It was launched at a 3-day meeting held in Chicago, sponsored by the National Lawyers Guild. When we asked Mr. Halperin about the role played by the National Lawyers Guild, again he became upset by the question.
I think when you attempt by asking questions about was the Campaign for Political Rights started by the Lawyers Guild, which will then be followed by a question of did I know that the Lawyers Guild was named by the California Un-American Activities Committee as a communist front, that the only conceivable purpose of such questions is to attempt to smear organizations and to discredit their work by tenuous and illegitimate connections which are absolutely irrelevant to what they're doing and can serve no other purpose than pure McCarthyism.
That brings us up to date in terms of the more prominent individuals and organizations which have been working to dismantle our internal security system. The names have changed over the years, but the methods and the rhetoric have not. Now, in spite of the fact that this campaign has been going on now for well over 30 years, and in spite of the fact that it enjoys the backing of a major foreign power with almost unlimited funding and full-time professional leadership, still, many Americans are of the opinion that somehow we have survived the attack. Surely someone in government is watching these things. That, of course, is a comforting thought, but unfortunately it is not a reflection of reality. We shall take a hard look at that reality in the next part of this program.
We Americans do not like to hear criticism of our presidents.
Okay, guys, right there. That's where we'll pause it, or that's where we'll end for tonight. So next, after that, so now you guys got the whole context. You know what McCarthy was, what was in his head, what he was going into, the danger that he saw coming, and the way that people were ignoring it, and like all the way up to Truman was ignoring it. Oh, nice, Max Normal. Thank you, man. I'm glad you enjoy it then. And yeah, it did take it was pretty dense. It's pretty dense. Oh, thank you, Evoke. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, so now I'll try to do chapter 2. I got a kind of a busy week, but not too bad. So, hopefully tomorrow night, ideally tomorrow night, around like 10 p.m., but if not, maybe, oh no, the wrestling stream is going to be fun. It's going to have 3 people on it, so it'll have, like, more voices. It won't just be me rambling on. It'll be Devola and Tad, too. Tad's funny. Devola knows so much about WWE. It's insane. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, Raul, no problem. So, yeah, ideally tomorrow night, and if not, like, this week for sure. For sure. And I'll let you guys know, hopefully tomorrow. Whenever I do that one, I'll let you know when the WWE one is. I made a group DM for me and Tad and Devola, and we'll get a bunch of ideas written down. I'll look up videos for each idea, and then we'll do it in a way where we can all be synced together and watch the video, and like we can all see it at the same moment and pause it if we want to, so like everyone will be able to go on the same thing. Oh, thank you, Metal Nick. Thanks, dude. Looking forward to chapter 2. Nice. Thank you, man. Let me see here. No problem, Triple Crown. Yep, Liam, you got it, man. See you, Rolly. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, no. Oh, yeah, Zan had this pretty funny with the clip. Give me timestamps for what? Okay, well, anyway, guys, like, good times tonight. It was fun. Got all the context, and now we'll talk about McCarthy next time. Alright, so I'll see you at chapter 2 coming this week.